Hello everyone, I'm back at it. This is another casual, relatively unedited video. Since I read out my analysis posts for Boys 2 Planet, considering the fact that I'm not gonna make a produce 101 style video about that for quite a while, I thought I may as well also do the same thing for Home Race, since I made similar posts. While I'm here, thank you everyone for enjoying the Produce 101 episode. I mean, I'm not surprised. I feel like anything on this channel that I make that's related to survival shows does well, and everything that's not related to survival shows doesn't do well. But I appreciate that everyone's enjoying it, and I appreciate the comments that have been left on it. Anyway, here I am with my home race posts. Home race had far lower viewership than Boys 2 Planet, which makes sense, you know. It was smaller scale, there were fewer trainees, there weren't English subtitles during the live streams, Mnet kind of did that on purpose, and I discussed this in my posts, so I won't get into it now. But for anyone who did not see it, because it happened in a flash, um, okay, well, let's start from the start. When Mnet announced Boys to Planet, they wanted to have two shows. One show was the K group, one show was the C group, and it was supposed to make two 8-member boy groups. One would promote in China, one would promote in Korea. Presumably there would be a bit of crossover. Before the show aired and before the show actually filmed the first episode, Mnet announced, yo, by the way, after 2 episodes, we're merging the shows. I don't think they ever actually announced why they were doing this. The consensus from fans was that they couldn't find a Chinese company to manage the group, but also that the idol ban in China is being upheld, therefore there was no point. You know, when they first proposed the idea, there was a possibility the ban would be removed, apparently. Anyway, so we ended up with the shows being merged, and obviously Aldi 1 have members from both groups. Wow! So now, well, I guess in the end, they found a Chinese company to manage a boy group, i.e., NCC, which is like a Chinese label under JYP, like a Chinese division of JYP, I guess, who also manage Boy Story. Oh my goodness. Wow, what a shocker. Who could guess that Mnet are working closely with companies that manage artists or idols slash trainees who they wanted to debut on their show? Doesn't this sound familiar? I'm getting produce flashbacks. Um, so since they found a company to manage the group, they sucked up a whole bunch of eliminated Chinese contestants, went, yo, here's another survival show. Have fun. What I personally find very interesting about Home Race, which is what I will also discuss on, like, in these posts, is the fact that, like, everyone was like, oh my goodness, so now we're going to figure out who the other the other 5 members of the Chinese group were going to be. Because, you know, they had to have an 8-member group. Obviously, 3 of them got into Aldi 1. What about the other 5? But the thing is, this was not all of the remaining Chinese contestants. This was only, what, 18 of them? And it was a very bizarre selection of 18. I expected this to be a lot of Chinese contestants who made it pretty far in the competition because those contestants were most likely to be in Mnet's original 8-member C group. However, they were a whole bunch of low-ranking trainees, so my hypothesis is Mnet have had to adjust. I do not think this show in any way proves who was destined for the original 8-member C group. For instance, I have a suspicion. I don't really have any evidence to support this, but I have a slight suspicion that Kaiwen was part of the original 8-member group. Let's assume that he was, just for the sake of this example. Kaiwen is part of the original 8-member C group. When Mnet decide to merge the show, they decide to ditch him because they only want, they only view, based on their editing of Boys to Planet, they only viewed Shinlong, Anshin, and Zihao as essential Chinese members, right? Therefore, they drop Kaiwen, rip him. Then they decide, oh, let's make this show. Either because they did something weird or Kaiwen decided not to join the show or something, contract, da-da-da-da-da. Kaiwen is not on the show. Therefore, it doesn't, we're not going to get any more evidence that he's part of the original 8-member C group because he's not here. He can't physically make it into Modesty, right? Therefore, Mnet would have to replace Kaiwen in their 5-member Modesty lineup with someone else. Who was that person? Was Kaiwen ever in it? We don't know. Point is, this is not evidence of who was in the original 8-member C group. This is evidence of who is in the 5-member flexible lineup of Modesty that Mnet wanted from Home Race. Mnet got the 18 trainees they got. It seems like there were a few people who Mnet turned down, in which case those people are obviously people Mnet don't want. And it seems like there's a few people, like maybe Nian, who turned Mnet down. In which case, let's say Mnet wanted Nian, right? Well, if he says no to them, what are they gonna do? They can't. Too bad, so sad. They'll just have to replace him. So yeah, I think that's important to understand. In the end, let me grab the lineup of this show. Okay, so here I have, go away. Here I have the list of the 18 contestants who are on the show. Oh, the other thing is, I bet Mnet was so depressed that they couldn't put Dongyu and Junmin on this show. They were probably, so angry. Anyway, whatever. So here's the list of the contestants. A lot of these people were eliminated, before the merge on the original show. Therefore, not only did they not really have a fandom, but also, I don't know how to say their names. I don't know who these people are. Even after the show, I still don't know who some of them are. So I'll do my best. I'm going to do my best to replicate the pronunciation of their names as they themselves say it in their introduction videos for Boys to Planet, but apologies in advance as usual. Anyway, with all of that said, let's start looking at my notes. Alright, I've got to get in character. Yeah, squad, now that the lack of English subtitles no longer hold my sadly monolingual self back, we're back, baby! Unshin finger guns. Then I added my Boys to Planet post for context. Mnet's riggery never stops, so my work never stops, even though I'm in the middle of analysing Produce 101 Season 1. Oh, yeah, having all of these shows go at the same time was crazy. Let's have a chit-chat. These episodes are blessedly decently short, especially compared to the Boys to Planet finale. They were still needlessly long, but I don't know what to expect at this point. 1. Show structure. The show being all online is 1. Cheaper, 2. Easier and faster, and 3. Means nothing sus that Mnet doesn't like happens by virtue of some trainees just being more popular in person, such as Xiongxing getting all stars in Hot, Leo getting 2 stars, etc. Basically, it allows them more control, a la Girls Planet. The shortened structure also means there's less chance for the status quo to shift, which is what they want because the trainees they like are mostly at the top. This means that the holy trio of Surin, Zihao, Hengyu are likely to keep getting all of the killing parts, getting more popularity and screen time, and getting more votes. Ranking the trainees top, mid, low based on popularity also maintains the popularity status quo for trainees Mnet manufactured in the original show. So, sorry, fellow boy story appreciators, Hanyu has no chance. Yep. A lot of my analysis about this show is based on the fact that the simple structure of the show, like I said here, was designed to maintain the status quo basically as much as possible. Everything being fan voted pretty much ensured that the popular trainees would always stay at the top. And I mean, all you need to do is look at the Boys Planet elimination graph. And you can see that, like, there is obviously a popularity discrepancy between especially Zihao and Hengyu and everyone else. Um, yeah, anyway, whatever. Um, there were very few people who Mnet wanted to change the status quo for in this show. Yeah, so I think the only people that they really wanted to change the status quo for was Guangxu and Yichen, who they didn't want in the group. I don't know why they let them into the show. That was kind of a dumb move. But I'm pretty convinced they don't want them because I don't think there's any evidence that Mnet did want them. The other person was Chowie, who I hope I'm saying his name right. I'm copying him a bit, and also Jaejung, who got eliminated like mega early on in Boys 2 Planet. But I guess Mnet was staring at the people who joined Home Race and they were like, sure, let's have him in the group. Why did they want him in the group? I don't know. I still, after Home Race and watching, I mean, looking at his Boys 2 Planet thing, it looks like he's a vocalist, but I still don't know what his purpose is. Except maybe visuals. I think he fits Korean beauty standards. Anyway, those were the only three people who they really wanted to change the status quo for. Everyone else they wanted to keep exactly the same. And so they did that. Pretty simple. Another thing Mnet have added solely to benefit them is the possibility of additional debut seats with higher fan votes. This is hilarious ISNA levels of riggery. They picked 5 seats likely to 1. Make up the remaining 5 members of the 8 original C trainees they wanted, and 2. Because they literally only want 5 people from this show. But what if someone they don't like Yichen, sneakily makes it in? Well, they announced from the start that there's a possibility to add more seats. How many fan votes equals more debut spots? We aren't told, and we never will be told, because Mnet wants the ability to choose that for themselves in the finale based on the finale results. So don't get your hopes up. Okay, I think I was a bit too skeptical about this. At this point, they hadn't told us how many votes was required to add an extra seat to the lineup. They did end up telling us they wanted 20 million per seat, which was like kind of crazy. I reckon the reason they announced it was probably to avoid rigging accusations. But they made it high because, I mean, every member that you add to a group, you have to, like, get more outfits, you have to change the choreography, you have to X, Y, and Z, like, it's extra people. You don't just add extra members to a group because you feel like it. You plan it out in advance. They clearly knew there was a high likelihood of Yichen and Guangxu making it in. Therefore, they wanted to adjust based on that. And it worked out well for them in the end because Chowie was in the group. And he wouldn't have made it in if they didn't add extra seats. So, I mean, Yichen wouldn't have either, but, you know, Mnet does what Mnet does. Okay, number 2 is the glorious return of, and a disclaimer, the glorious return of mentor debut group fan killing part, mandatory worship, and classic editing shenanigans like zooms, sound effects, things cut together from different moments, weird music to add context, lead confessionals, etc. Just a reminder, which I think is needed after my Boys to Planet posts, 99% of what I write here isn't my opinion, it's what Mnet wants your opinions to be. I ain't hating on anyone, lol. Also keep in mind that literally everything I talk about is likely edited/altered, as in when I say X person is evil, that is what the edit shows, but even the edit itself could be false. For instance, I noticed that even in episode 1, things are edited from different time periods for drama. Like when Surin's teammates are thinking about leaving his team, he looks shocked, but in the immediate next shot, his face, posture, etc. is completely different. Hilarious lack of continuity checking here. Yeah, so you can tell that they edited things weirdly because of continuity issues like that. 3. Intro. Opening on them all having sob stories of being eliminated on Boys to Planet before we get to the motivational segment of how they've returned. This is classically dramatic with both good performances and bad ones. The intro gives tons of screen time to Zihao. He is everywhere, as he is in the rest of the show. It also gives a lot of screen time in general to the 3 centers of the first mission, Surin, Zihao, and Hengyu. Since this show doesn't have a signal song, should we basically assume that these 3 are the centers and thus by the rules of Mnet guaranteed to debut? I guess we'll see. Yes, I will stand by that. They're basically the 3 centers. They were guaranteed to debut. They did debut. Disgustingly enough, this show still uses 50% Korean votes, 50% global votes for a Chinese group. Kill me now, Mnet. Even Hip Hop Princess is doing better than this. Where's the 40-40-20 ratio, Mnet? This like angered me so much, and I was so angry that no one was talking about it. It's especially bad because Hip Hop Princess was running at exactly the same time as Home Race. Hip Hop Princess, if you haven't seen it, I mean I haven't seen it, but I've seen a bit. Um, it's Korean and Japanese, right? And they did a good thing because it's Korean and Japanese, it's like a collaboration. They had 40% Korean, 40% Japanese, 20% rest of the world ratio. Obviously, that makes your international vote even more useless, but at least Japanese people got a say in the group, right? I thought they would do something similar for Home Race, but they didn't, and I reckon the reason they did it is I feel like I must have mentioned it later. Oh, I literally mentioned in the next sentence. What am I talking about? But on a more logical note, I can tell you why. It's because Mnet still want to maintain the status quo at all costs. Exactly. Mnet already have the data on the voting patterns for these trainees in a scenario where it's 50-50 Korean global. Therefore, they want to keep it that way because they don't know, like, I don't know if this is true, it might just be a rumor. I feel like Guangzhou had like a really big Chinese voting base. So if Mnet make it 50, like 40-40-20 or 50% Chinese, 50% rest of the world, everything's going to change because the Chinese fans have different faves, and Mnet might not like that, so they want to keep it the same. Anyway, the set is tiny and low budget, and the first trainee to enter is Zihao. I suppose we can basically consider him as our first demo stage, i.e. as Mnet wanting him. I was correct about this. I mean, I'm not surprised because I had a suspicion that he was part of the original 8-member group, but I will add this to my list of first demo stage people who debuted. He comes in with Hanwin and Bowen, and the whole show is pretty cute about how everyone, both the trainees and the mentors and Mnet, are reuniting. Yeah, I liked that they were all like happy to see each other. Boy Story are back, Sans, Shinlong, and Zihao gets even more screen time while Hanyu is ignored and gets to be depressed about not being as popular as the other two. Chaoui is introduced, who was basically unknown on the original show, and Jack is, of course, back for cheap comedy and Aussiness. There's some mandatory fanboying over the Planet Makers. Ahem, did you say Planet Guardians? Mandatory Jaejung intro and worship, and mandatory Dunghung High depression over how he's been on 3 Mnet shows over 3 years and still has no fans. I feel for him, but I think he needs to try his luck with a company that isn't called Mnet, because they clearly hate him and want to betray him as the most useless, boring person ever. Yeah, I don't know why he came back. Like, what did he think would happen? I suppose he had a higher chance of debut here because most of the other people were very unknown, but like, buddy, haven't you like got the message by now that Mnet don't like you? Fourth, the producing battle. The planet makers picking everything is another way that Mnet maintained the status quo. Hunwin, Surin, and Xiaowei get decent screen time in this segment. Oh my goodness, really? Surin, Zihao, and Hengyu are the unsurprising winners. Their general popularity is probably miles above the others, and they're arguably the three most skilled contestants on the show anyway. Also, I love Binghua's nails. Yeah, he had these like cute little, like manicured nails the entire show. Anyway, there's a dramatic team selection where Hanwen and Zei, especially Zei, are portrayed as skilled/desirable, and Yichen and Dang Honghai are portrayed as undesirable. Hanyu also gets to be sad more, but still gets no screen time. Now let's talk winners, losers, and those who are kind of in the middle. This is collating basically the rest of the episode into one section. As people have complained about, they only showed one performance this episode, which, yes, is crazy. So ISTJ team naturally have more content. Also, Zhao Ting, the queen, is back to grace us with her presence and mentor this show. Slay! Alright, let's talk about drama. So in this episode, the winners were Zihao, the absolute biggest winner of this show, this episode, this performance, this team, etc, etc, etc. Zihao is arguably the most generally liked trainee on the show, and had the highest final rank on Boys to Planet. He's smart about making content, and he gets lucky that Mnet like his ability to make them content. He's got a great variety personality, an endearing personality, comedic levels of confidence, and the skill to back it up. And Mnet wants you to know that. He probably had the most screen time this episode, even above Hengyu, and the literal only things against him are 1. His supposed ugliness, and 2. Him being known more for his personality than his skills. But neither of those are big downfalls until we get to one-pick voting. Which, as I'll discuss later, they hilariously never did. So obviously Zihao was never going to be disadvantaged by this. Like, his only disadvantage is one pick, and they didn't do one pick, so of course he's chilling. In this episode, Zihao's skills are especially emphasized, as well as how much he's liked by the other contestants. He has a huge hug with Jack. Don't Zihao's hugs look great? And he's praised for his rap skills. He's also shown to have a good attitude and encourage others, for example, Hanwen. Don't you find it hilarious that he's highlighted for his leadership when Hanyu is literally the leader of Boy Story? Hahaha, I don't. This is Mnet for you. Next is Zei. Yeah, I accidentally spelled his name wrong this entire post, so my apologies. I fixed it next post. He's the most desirable trainee outside of the top 3, complimented tons and complimented by proxy as all 3 top 3 members want him, which makes him look good and popular. Also complimented by Zihao for picking up the drama choreography quickly. Next, Bowen is a mini winner. He's complimented for his vocals and dance, gets little screen time, but all of it was positive. As far as losers, it's Dang Honghai. He has had his image changed from zen on Boys to Planet to depressed and unwanted on Home Race. Literally every time he gets screen time, it's about him being depressed, unwanted, having no friends, lacking skills, lacking fans, being excluded, and so on. Low-tier contestants are picked over him. He has no fans, he doesn't get the parts he wants, and is ridiculed by Mnet for his rap, and he gets challenged twice in the changeover, suggesting he's the weak link of the group. He then gets kicked out and has to suffer some more, but we'll talk about that more in ISTJ. As far as neutral edits, I noted that Binghua seems to basically be a secondary leader, which was interesting. He didn't get any screen time, but like whenever Zihao was doing something, he was always helping Zihao, or he was doing a lot of the announcements, narration, etc. I just wanted to see more of him. Hanwin has a mini lacking confidence edit where he is supported by Zihao. Editing is pretty neutral, storyline wasn't resolved in this episode. Rip to Zishao, who's completely unnoted, non-existent. The main point of this team seems to be that Zihao is a god and everyone should bow down to him. Zihao also seems to be the main character, if not one of the main characters of this show, and Mnet clearly recognise his popularity because they use him getting angry with the team and his struggles as leader to tease the next episode. I can only imagine the edit will portray him in a good light and someone like Binghua or Zishao in a bad light, especially considering the teaser showed him being complimented for his leadership. I was completely correct. This is like the same thing when Gono and Kangmin were fighting on Boys Planet in the teaser, and I wrote in my post, like, yeah, I can't imagine that they're going to edit this in a bad way for Gono. Like, they're going to show that he was in the right or something like that. And it's the same with Zihao. These are two trainees they clearly like, therefore, why would they portray them negatively? Um, Speaking of, I don't know if I said this later, but Zihao was not in the original top 8, or at least I'm fairly certain he was not in the original 8-member C group. But if I was Mnet and I looked at this 18-member lineup, to not put Zihao in it would be like career suicide. Like he would probably be the first person I would pick for the group. I mean, I am biased. I am biased, but he would still be the first person. Alright, next ISTJ. The only performance shown this episode, so they get more screen time and content. Winners are Hengyu. Although he had some questionable moments like being a harsh leader, assigning people parts unilaterally, and being harsh on Jack, overall I think he's a winner and an unfortunate sufferer of RBF. Let me explain. He is complimented over and over and over by his teammates, by the other contestants, and by the mentors. He is portrayed to be by far the most skilled person in the team after Zayi leaves, and they literally say he is, quote, carrying the team. He's also highlighted as being popular. He also gets assigned an underdog arc, even though he isn't the underdog. It's the other members of the team who aren't as skilled who are the concern. Hengyu gets all of the screen time in this mission and is shown to be doing his best as a leader to teach others. He struggles with Jack's utter incompetence, gets a depression edit about the state of his team, and is the only one complimented in the interims. He's also complimented during the performance and ranks first, duh. Now, he is portrayed as having changed from Boys to Planet and as being scarier and a harsher leader than he would have been then. He tells off Jack a lot and seems unsympathetic to Jack's illness, but this still ends up being a win for him because Mnet used it to show his growth. They show him talking about his fight with Kangmin in Main Dish, and they show how he grew from this experience, realised unity is the most important thing in a team, and realised he needs to consider his teammates more. They then show him seeing a younger version of himself in Jack, Shinlong style, and apologising to Jack and working with him to help him improve. This is like a 10 out of 10 arc and is intended to destroy any last concerns anyone might have about his personality, making him ripe pickings for the final group. You'll probably notice this, and I think I discussed this in the episode 2 post, but the storylines that Zihao, Surin, and Hengyu got as leaders and centers of their respective teams were very similar to each other. Like, all three of them were working on becoming better leaders. All three of them were like carrying their team, and the rest of their team was trash and X, Y, and Z. And then they all had like a cute little baby they looked after. In Hengyu's team, like Jack and Chowie, and then like obviously Zihao has like Bowen and stuff like that. It was just so interesting that all three had basically identical storylines, and I don't think anyone really talked about it. Mind you, no one really talked about this show, so maybe that's just that happening. Next, Jack is a mini winner. I wasn't sure whether to put him in neutral or here, but I think he edges out on the positive side, and I'll show you why. On one hand, he was shown to be super and insanely incompetent, to crazy degrees. He was also shown to have no ability to read the room, to use jokes when it was inappropriate to, and to just not be serious in general. However, this was justified through him being sick, and he got the chance to explain his thoughts in a confessional, thus humanizing him. Shinlong, is that you? Saying that he didn't initially want to join the show, but his desire to be an idol was so great that it made him break out of his comfort zone. This, combined with the other members talking about how much he practices and helpful montages of him practicing, endears him to us and makes him seem motivational and likable. He's then shown improving a lot, highlighted for his improvement, which is something Mnet only points out in trainees they at least somewhat like. Also, Mnet continuously show how liked he is by the other contestants. Combine this with his tons of screen time in general, and I think we have a winner here. I'll talk about him more later. Next is Chaoyi. He was highlighted as needing to be in the first place team to survive while being unknown. He was complimented and highlighted in the performance and called handsome. Although they don't explicitly say it, they imply that he's a hidden gem that they missed previously. Next is Zihao. He's shown to be desirable and skilled, he just leaves the team too early to get much more screen time in this episode. As far as losers, it's Dang Hong Hai again. He gets the sad distinction of being a double loser. After being shunted to this team, he struggles to learn the choreography and his mistakes are highlighted in the interim. He continues to be shown as worthless, unwanted, and needlessly bitter and depressed. Mnet are basically sending the message that he should have got their message by this point, realised they don't like him, and moved on. As far as neutral people, there's Kristen. He got no screen time, but he was praised in the performance. And also Mingcha, who got no screen time, and I actually forgot he was in the team, so rip to him. This team basically got the Walmart Shinlong arc split between Hengyu and Jack, who got all of the screen time. Them making up and working together, thanks to Hengyu's emotional growth and development, was the highlight of the episode for me, both in terms of the levels of Mnet riggery and in terms of nice moments in general. Yeah, so by this I mean, like, it was a brilliant Mnet moment, but it was also just, like, nice in general. Also, it was what made them both winners. Next, Hot. I think this team got the least screen time out of the three, but we'll see what we can figure out. Winners, it's Surin. He got lots of screen time, was shown to be skilled, and was made a sympathetic figure. He gets to be anxious about his team's skills and gets to be a second person used in the episode 2 teaser for drama, with his team struggling with vocals, which we know from experience he is at least competent in. He also gets a sympathetic edit of wanting to do well to make his mum proud so that she'll come to Korea. He leads the team selflessly in learning the choreography and has confessionals where he is very humble, which is a good trait for an idol. He's betrayed by his team in the team transfer and has a highlighted struggle arc next episode. I mean, he did get the Zihao Surin soulmates arc as well, which shows them as a pair to not be separated, but this is somewhat irrelevant. Yeah, that's like, oh, sorry, somewhat unrelated. It's not irrelevant, but it's unrelated to Hot. It's just something that they were doing to make sure that Surin didn't fall, because I know, like, lots of people were saying that Surin was actually more popular than Zihao. Oh, Surin has a stronger one pick than Zihao, X, Y, and Z. Okay, first of all, I mean, we weren't to know this, but they never went to one pick to begin with. So we don't know if he has a stronger one pick than Zihao. But he doesn't have the same general popularity. Zihao clearly has a higher general popularity, which is why he survived the second elimination. And that we're like, oh my goodness, we gotta like convince the Zihao voters to vote for Surin too. As far as losers, we have Yichen. Similarly to Dang Hong Hai, he was portrayed as unwanted, being the last top-class person to be picked. He also had flashbacks shown to negative edits of him on Boys to Planet. He didn't get much screen time, but everything he did get was negative. We know that they don't like him, and I recommend you only vote him into the group if you're prepared for him to be treated terribly. Okay, this buddy, his name, like, never got said ever. So I'm gonna say Sike, and pray that I got his name correct, and if I didn't, I apologize to him and his fans. Anyway, Guangxu and Sike, I grouped them together because they both basically had no screen time, but they were portrayed as unskilled vocalists. As far as neutral edits, Shunyu was a mini winner with his acrobatics skills shown, but otherwise he didn't get anything, and Hanyu got no screen time, rip. Alright, fifth, Mnet's top 5 and their tiers of trainees. Yeah, like I said here, my opinion could well change in the next episode, but I feel like the top 5 is pretty obvious here, or at least the top 4. I'll include confidence, ratings, and thoughts. The top 4 was like mega obvious throughout the show, uh, but the tiers of candidates, and especially the idea that Mnet could add extra seats, was why I added tiers. Like, who do they want in the top 4? Undeniable, unnegotiable in the group, and then who are other people that they're like, yeah, sure. Alright, so first is Hengyu. I was 8 out of 10 confident. He got lots of screen time, had positive screen time, was shown to be skilled, had a growth arc. He was probably one of the original top 8 C members. I just included my thoughts on top 8 C members because this was like a hot topic at the time. Next is Zihao. I was 9 out of 10 confident. Zihao Nation rise! He got infinite screen time. He was the main character. He was likable and complex. He was skilled and so on, so on. Number 1 leader candidate for the final group. I don't think he was one of Mnet's original 8 C trainees, although it is possible, but I think they picked him from this 18-person lineup because they'd be dumb not to. He has basically everything going for him from both my perspective and Mnet's. Next, Surin, 8 out of 10 confident. Second half of the Zhao Rina pair this season. Again, Mnet would be dumb to not want him from these 18 trainees. He was possibly part of the original top 8 C trainees. I don't think he was, but like, it's possible. Next is Zei. I was 6 out of 10 at this time. I was pretty convinced they wanted him for the original C top 8, so I was surprised with how little screen time he got in this episode. However, he was portrayed as both skilled and likable and was the first trainee we saw post-intro. He also may get a struggle and improvement arc next episode, which could give him tons of screen time. Yeah, so you can see that even though I wasn't mega confident about him, I still thought that he was in their, like, top 4 that they absolutely want in. I don't know why I wrote I'm not entirely sure about the 4th spot. It should have been 5th spot. Looking back after the show, I think the person they wanted for the 5th spot was definitely Chaoui. But you can see, even though he didn't get that much screen time, you could tell that I already knew at this point that Mnet liked him. And I think a lot of I guess we'll look at the comments, but I have a feeling that a lot of people told me that they didn't like him, but they did like him. Alright. Here are my candidates for the 5th spot. Hanwen, probably the next most popular and most obvious candidate who Mnet seems to have at least a reluctant fondness for, although he wasn't one of their original top 8. He got a weirdly low amount of screen time for them to want him. Next is Jack. Mnet may have pivoted to him being a Sohye fast improvement endearing type. I'd be surprised considering how much they hated him on Boys to Planet, but he is one of the standout personalities in this lineup and is pretty popular. They certainly like him more than people like Yichen. He got a weirdly high amount of screen time for them to not want him. Next was Chaoui. He was highlighted a lot as being handsome and relatively skilled. Seems like they'd rather him as a visual over Guangxu, who is currently trending to be popular. Got a weirdly high amount of screen time for them to not want him. And that's it. I said, I reckon I'm going to put Jack in at 6 out of 10 confidence rating for now. Looking at the 4-person lineup, it's super balanced with vocalists, rappers, dancers, variety personalities, and leadership, so it would be acceptable to have a lower skilled trainee like Jack in there for the international appeal and the aegyo the others are missing. I'll stick by this, like, obviously looking back, I don't think Jack was their 5th member, although they would have been okay with him. But I think with all of the information I had this episode, he was the obvious person to put in fifth. And I'll stick by what I said, and I repeated this throughout the rest of the show. The top four that Mnet wanted are just so skilled that it would be okay for the fifth member to have fewer skills and bring more utility to the group. So, since there's only 18 people on this show, how about we organise them into tiers? Fun. The Mnet almost certainly wants tier is Surin, Zihao, Hengyu, and Zei. Mnet probably likes / would be happy making it in, a la Jiwoong, Junso, Sanghyun, etc. Jack, Hanwin, Chowie, and Bowen. I believe in you, S-Cube's child! Yeah, Bowen's another person I'll discuss. They don't like, but relatively neutral, i.e. invisible edit. Kristen and Shunyu got minor compliments. Hanyu, Zishao, Mingche, and Binghua. Don't seem to want or want to avoid is Yichen, Sikye, Guangshu, and Dang Honghai. Unfortunately for Mnet, two of these people are in the top group of trainees, so they're trying to shove them out in favour of people like Chowie and Jack. It's really important to note here that this does not reveal the 5 missing C members of the original C group after Anshin, Shinlong, and Jiahao. Precisely because there are only 18 trainees here, who may not include Mnet's desired 5 members. For instance, I have a feeling that Kaiwen may have been part of that lineup, but we'll never know because he didn't join this show. I don't think that Zihao was part of the 8-member C group, but I do think that he's one of Mnet's picks on this show, because he's one of the main standouts of those who they ended up with. A good chunk of these trainees didn't even make it to the merged show, so were at least initially disliked by Mnet. Mnet just had to pivot once they found out who would and wouldn't be in this show. TLDR, this doesn't mean that Zihao, Hengyu, Surin, Jack, and Zei are the lost Aldi 1 members, Lamau. Alright, conclusions. Ahaha, I feel like an Mnet mind reader sometimes, or maybe an industry plant. The rest of this show will be interesting, considering how much effort Mnet have gone to maintain the status quo. I wonder if their attempts to change it and remove Guangshu plus Yichen will work. Some of the riggery, i.e. the added seats, was so hilarious that I laughed out loud. Also, I expected that if a Girls Planet 2 would happen, it would be announced at Mama, but it wasn't, so I guess I'm right that it ain't happening for a while, if at all. By the way, this show's first episode made me finish my first commonplace journal / learning notebook after 2 years, so good on it, I guess. First journal I've ever finished. And happy being liked by Mnet Award, Zihao Nation! I would have added him to my flair, but I didn't have space for him and Shinlong and Dongyu, so I guess I'm just back to being a Gunnock stan. If Zihao doesn't debut here, I'll be very unimpressed. I don't think even Mnet's editing would be able to fake how good his attitude seems to be, and he is an absolute hidden genius at reality and celebrity life. Holy moly, get this guy an award. Big brain, slayful moves. Squad, just don't forget, no matter what, a critical thought a day keeps Mnet away. So, as far as the things I said here, I was correct that, the fact that this show maintained the status quo so much did kind of shoot Mnet in the foot in that they couldn't remove Guangshu and Yichen. I was right about Girls Planet, like everyone was saying, oh, they're going to announce it at Mama, then they didn't, yep. And as far as this, my flair used to, I guess it's not that important, but I find it interesting. I used to have Gunnock and Shinlong, and then I was like, but I also want to add Zihao and Dongyu, and there's not enough space for that, there's a character limit. So, sorry to Shinlong, I booted him, and now it's just Gunnock. Alright, let's talk about the comments. This is just all of us being very depressed about Hanyu being doomed. I hope that he doesn't feel too bad about it. I hope that he doesn't feel like he's too ugly for a K-pop group or anything like that, because he's not, and I have hope for him in the future. Here's more people feeling depressed about Hanyu. There's also, the question of Bowen. I do think that Mnet wanted Bowen in this show. I'll talk about that at the end though, like my final thoughts on Mnet's final ranking, but I think they wanted him as a stretch member, not as their top 5. This person's asking me about first place. Um, the whole thing here is like, who did Mnet want to be first? There was absolutely no suggestion that first place would be the center of the group, but you know, first place is still important. They represent your show, right? Zihao was like the most obvious mascot of Home Race, but I thought that Mnet probably wanted Hengyu more, and Hengyu was like the obvious person to get enough votes to be first. I did say there's a small possibility of Surin having a panic vote spurt. However, this is based solely in a scenario of a one pick, which didn't happen. I thought this comment was really interesting. I don't remember what PwC stands for, but they're like the company that does the voting stuff for Mnet. Mnet's not allowed to do their own voting things anymore because of the produce scandal. So I didn't actually fact check this, but if this is true that they didn't mention PwC, like that is genuinely hilarious. We're getting closer and closer to produce every day. This was like a whole bunch of rumors, I think, basically, that some of the C trainees were rejected and some of them rejected Mnet and X, Y, and Z. But like this thing is the crucial bit. Someone said he applied to be on Home Race but wasn't chosen, not sure who it was. Okay, depending on who it was, that really changes a lot of things. Like if it was just some rando who Mnet obviously didn't like from the start, that doesn't change anything. I don't have like a major opinion on this one, but I just really appreciate the fact that people were discussing like extra types of riggery in my comments section. Like, I'm really glad that I got people thinking about it. I loved this. Like, so I'm not like a Reddit frequenter, right? I'm not a big Reddit user, but when like I'm about to make posts, obviously I'm more active in forums because I'm responding to people's like wacko Boys Planet takes and stuff. So after Boys to Planet finished, I wasn't really on Reddit for like a month or whatever, and then Home Race started gearing up and I saw all these weird riggery takes and I started responding to people and I guess this person noticed. But this actually makes me really happy. Like, I thought it was so funny that this person, like, probably not on purpose, like, I'm not calling them a stalker or anything, obviously they're not, but I just find it so funny to imagine this person, like, scrolling through the Reddit and then they're like, oh my goodness, Chroma and Stars is back, like, oh, something's gonna happen soon. Like, I feel like I've been spotted like a cryptid or something. It was so funny. This person's a big Zihao stan, which I appreciate. Um, a lot of people were very like uh questioning my choice to put Jack up the top. Which I think is fair. Like I understand why people were skeptical, but I think the sheer amount of screen time he got in the episode made it make sense. And this is one of the people who were not convinced that Chowie was someone that Mnet wanted. Mind you, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe I convinced this person, or maybe I'm just misinterpreting their comment. I was happy that people were happy with my stuff. Here's another person who's like, I mean, I'm not particularly upset by this because I've come to expect this every single time. But every time I make like any video about any, or not any video, any post, any video, any content, whatever, about any survival show, there's always someone who's telling me that I hate a trainee. Like, you can see I'm just over it at this point. Like, bruv, do you really think that I hate Dung On Hai? Like, really? And that's that for that one. Let's talk about episode 2. which I stuffed up and I accidentally wrote episode 1 and then I published the post and then once you publish a post it doesn't let you edit the title apparently, so I was just suffering forever. Anyway, Bowen stands. I bring good news. Welcome back, squad. Okay, so first of all, Mnet announced that the criteria to add extra debut seats is 20 million votes per seat, for a maximum of 3 extra seats and 8 total debut spots. Now, first of all, they haven't specified whether they're going to count, for instance, the single vote that I cast for 5 people as 1 vote or as 5, but regardless, they said that there were 14.6 million votes cast by the point of December 13th. I assume this is from when the voting started, which was like a week before the show started, so at this rate we can expect 1 extra debut spot or 2 if we're lucky. I think I was just excessively paranoid about this. So if you cast 1 vote for 5 people, because it's a 5 vote system, they would count that as 5 votes. I think I was just being super paranoid. Um, However, I was right, and I was right. I talk about this in the comments of this post as well, that with the rate that people were voting, there was a maximum of 2 extra debut spots. There was no way we were going to hit the 3. Mnet are mega dumb for revealing this, because if they didn't, they could have just done what they did for Isna and added as many spots as members they wanted based on the final rankings. Anyway, first, the intro. Nothing too exciting here. Chunyu gets a funny moment, Yichen gets to cry about this being his 6th survival show, and everyone else gets to cry about not debuting before they're given a pep talk by Jaejung. Cool. Second is hot. The whole storyline here is that Surin, like Hengyu, is basically a god and the only one doing well on this team, carrying his team, but even he can only lift so much. So, classic skilled leader struggle arc. Later we also get a confidence arc for Shunyu. This is the team that has the main people that Mnet want to get rid of, Guangshu and Yichen, so we kind of knew this would happen. Winners, first Surin, duh. I don't even think I need to tell you about this. He got the most screen time in this segment by far, got the most well-rounded character, was consistently and constantly praised, was the only person praised in the interim, and was shown to be a good and considerate leader on top of being skilled. Good skills plus good personality plus amusing is the definition of what people like in a K-pop idol. Also got to worry about whether his leadership was an issue with the performance. Also, I find it hilarious that we had Junghao in season 1 who was a self-imposed cut sleeve because he rolls up his sleeve to play violin, and here we have Surin who is an Mnet imposed cut sleeve via them covering up his tattoos. Slay. Next is Shunyu. Got the most screen time after Surin and the Anxious Baby storyline. Got the most compliments after Surin, was highlighted lots for his skills and cuteness, had his acrobatics section praised a lot, worked with Surin, got injured and was worried about the team, so on, so on. His acrobatic section got the Soyeon/Hui flashback edit. OMG, can he do a good job? And of course he did a good job. Basically was the talented baby. However, in the end, I think he's a bit of a loser because he was given a crop top and was called a sexy 15-year-old, so don't forget they did say that produce is wholesome porn. Also, the fact that he was 5th and Guangxu was 2nd clearly shows 1, how the rankings are a popularity contest, and 2, clearly pissed Mnet off. As far as losers, we have Shike. His mistakes were highlighted, he got no other screen time, he ranked last. And Guangshu, as expected, Mnet tried to shove him out as he's currently the biggest threat to their lineup. They made him look absolutely incompetent and undeserving of his rank and main vocal spot. His mistakes were highlighted in both the interim and the final performance, and even in practice, where he was the main thing that Surin was anxious about, or at least Mnet would lead you to believe that. He also said that he likes singing and chose it himself, but the mentors said that he was bad, and his lack of skill makes his wish for singing seem silly and overly idealistic, like the dumb dream a 5-year-old has or something. Basically, they're trying to make him seem as useless for this boy group as possible. Then notes/neutral. Hanyu looked like Songhwa in his hood, in my opinion. He got a few highlights, but was still pretty invisible. Yichen was invisible. I guess they don't really feel like they need to evil edit him, at least not yet. I mean, honestly, he's basically out at this point. He's at the bottom of the possible debut ranks, he doesn't have the visual sticking power of Guangxu, and he won't be given an edit that improves his rank like Bowen and Chaoyi are. The rankings of this team really indicate how this whole thing is a popularity contest, but produce always has been. As far as Yichen, the only reason he got in was because of the added debut seats. So I guess I was kind of right here, but I was also wrong. However, I do think Mnet did a dum-dum by showing an interim where he was in a position to debut, whatever. Next is drama. Unsurprising that they'd keep this to last, Zihao is the main character of this show, and this combined with him yelling in the teaser meant that he was destined to be last. As far as winners, Zihao, fork found in kitchen, he is the main character of the show. See Surin's notes and Hengyi's last episode, as in he had the same storyline. Last episode, I will also happily gloat to say that I predicted him yelling at his team would still portray him in a good light, although I did stuff up by thinking that someone else would be evil edited, instead no one was. You may have been anxious thinking it was impossible to edit someone so well from such a crash out, but never underestimate Mnet. They portray Zihao as basically the most angelic figure on this show. Mnet paints a sob story of how he can't rely on anyone else in his team, and how he's a good leader, but his team are just trash. Him yelling at them is used by Mnet to show how much they should bow down to him, and how conscious he is of the fans, which is good. And this is exactly what they do. His team instantly talks about how sorry they are to him, and they resolve to do well and practice more for him. Not for the fans, but for their poor, selfless, skilled, and tortured leader. Hilarious, but also, I love me some good Zihao praise. The Zihao praise continues through the rest of the episode, by the way. But even a non-K-pop fan could have predicted that. He got the leader god edit, especially when they praised him for covering for Bowen's vocals in the interim, and literally had an everyone clapped moment when he said that he did it so the team could stay on track. Mnet, I can see you want someone for leader, perhaps even more than you wanted Hanbin. Next is Bowen. What's the difference between Bowen's vocal struggle and Guangxu's vocal struggle? Do tell. Well, Bowen's was excused by him being sick, i.e. the fault of external circumstances, while Guangxu's was implied to be a personal fault. Outside of his vocal struggles being portrayed in a better light, Bowen is shown to be skilled and cute, as well as being a choreographer and a visual. I think they're going to portray him as an all-rounder considering they've already highlighted both his dance and vocals. The good news for the Bowen stans is that they clearly like him, at least as part of their stretch group, 6 to 8 members. If nothing else will prove this to you, let me point out how many compliments he got during the performance, even when he had some potentially slightly off-pitch moments which could have been criticised but weren't. Next is Zihao. We all knew this would happen from last episode. Zihao has been consistently portrayed as skilled and desirable and is Mnet's pick for the visual of the group. They're clearly trying to shove out Guangxu for him. He was given lots of screen time, was shown to be generally skilled and hardworking, and he was the one who got to be the voice for the rest of the team as they bow down to Zihao. He is the one who feels bad for Zihao, and as Mnet tells it, prompts the rest of the team to get it together. Also, if you thought that somehow Zihao's yelling was bad, Zay's here to tell you otherwise, because he literally immediately afterwards says, yeah, so actually Zihao's yelling at us was good and got us to get it together, and then we worked hard because we felt bad for our god Zihao. Is massively complimented, ranks first, and then is humble about it. As far as losers, we have Hanwen. He was only a small loser. He had a mistake highlighted and basically no other screen time. And Zihao, he got no screen time, ranked last, rip. Notes or neutral, Binghua was criticised for his skills but also resolved to do better for Zihao's sake and got a sympathetic sob story about being sad since he ranked 5th. As far as the overall team ranking and edit, the final team ranking was Drama first, ISTJ second, and Hot third. This is 0% surprising. Drama have Zihao and Zai, who are super popular, and then Hanwen, Bowen, and Binghua, who have decent popularity. ISTJ have Hengyu, who is the current rank 1 by votes and probably carried the team alone, but they also have Dunghong Hai, Jack, and Chaohui, who have decent popularity. Hot, they only have Surin and Guangxu, the latter being a divisive trainee who didn't perform well, and Yichen is losing popularity as far as I know. Anyway, Jack and Bowen get screen time. So if you didn't already notice, basically every single performance was the same. Each of the holy trio, Zihao, Hengyu, and Surin, were the killing part and the leader, and at some point, whether in interim or rehearsal, every single team got chewed out for letting their leaders down and for being useless. The three leaders were the only ones who were basically never criticised, and they're basically gods at this point. Beyond this, every leader got to have a cute little baby they look after / help. For Hengyu, it was Jack, for Surin, it was Shunyu, and for Zihao, it was Bowen, and to a lesser extent, Zei, who was kind of like the older brother in this father-son situation. These babies are the people Mnet don't necessarily want in the final group, but they do want these people near the debut spots, because they want to be able to switch out people they don't like for the babies. The fact that Zihao has 2 babies makes sense, considering he has arguably the most trainees Mnet wants in his team. Actually, honestly, as I'll discuss this later, we can use the babies to make an ideal lineup, which probably isn't far off from the real one. There's very few evil edits in this show, at least so far. This is probably because Mnet thinks that an easier way to get people to debut is through invisibility for a show like this, especially maintaining invisibility for people who were already invisible, like Zishao, Sike, and Hanyu. Next we have the Team Ace battle. Well, I would have made this post yesterday, but by the time I got to this point of the episode, the subs just stopped working, so I decided to give Mnet some time to get it together and come back the next day. Unfortunately, they did not get it together, and there was still lots of dialogue unsubbed, not to mention producer / editor comments. Did anyone else have this issue? If not, I apologise for anything I might have missed by virtue of lost subs and my lack of Korean / Chinese language skills. Anyway, I don't need language skills to know that there's a mandatory product placement section and shenanigans in the morning, including lots of Hanwen and Zihao screen time. Any trainee with a tiny bit of common sense on this show should really attach themselves to Zihao, which seems to be what Hanwen did. This battle is for the aces in each team to compete, and realistically is just so that Mnet can give more screen time to people they like. The unfortunate part for them is that, well, the trainees get to pick the aces, and they may not pick the people Mnet wants. Rip. I bet Mnet were crying when Hanwen and Guangzhou got in over Shunyu and Bowen. Mnet's staff almost certainly were whispering in trainees' ears during this, but there's only so much they can do. Anyway, Zei's lack of presence in the group is explained by his flashback to Gonu being a one more time infinity leader in La 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 La. The point of this battle is to create a killing part choreography, which you can tell Mnet set up to very nicely benefit people they like or feel fond, I guess, of. Like Surin and Bowen, both of whom have been pointed out by the edit as being good for this. Now let's discuss the selection of aces because it was very interesting. In Hot, Surin is obvious. Yichen, Hanyu, and Guangxu nominate themselves for various reasons. Surin picks Guangxu because of his Stray Kids experience, but realistically, he's just the best pick in general because of his popularity. This show has certainly led us to believe that Shunyu would be the best choice for this though. For ISTJ, Hengyu is obvious despite the fact that he's lacking confidence in creating choreography and carrying the team. The whole team lacks confidence, which leads them to kind of shoving Chaohui into the role, which may have been encouraged by the production team because they like him. Drama, Zihao is again obvious. Even though Zei is the obvious choice, he flat out refuses as he doesn't want to let the team down. Zihao's self-nominated order is Zei, then Hanwen, then Bowen, so he naturally moves to Hanwen. There is a bit of small drama over the fact that Bowen would certainly be a more talented candidate for this, but that Hanwen is more popular. This leads to what I would describe as arguably, oddly enough, a mini evil edit of Binghua, who points out Bowen's lack of popularity as a bad thing, which makes us feel a sense of injustice regarding Bowen as his skills are being ignored in favour of his popularity, while Hanwen's lacking skills are accepted because of his popularity. Regardless, this is a popularity contest. It's hilarious that during the reveal of the aces, they don't even bother blurring the faces of the three centers since they're just guaranteed to be there. Okay, as far as the battle itself, the winners. First is Zihao, naturally. He was praised excessively and extensively in the performance, was given some of the fewest criticisms on the team, and was implied to be the most skilled contestant overall on the show via the fan evaluation comments. I don't know what to tell you, he's just guaranteed godhood on this show. I'm getting tired of writing and see how was praised in my notes. Also, did you notice that he was basically evaluating the group with the masters in the dance segment? One, I forgot who, even patted him on the back, like the masters are basically treating him as an equal now, haha. I mean, he does have like 8 years of experience. Yeah, I'm pretty sure one of the people in the comments actually commented the screen cap of this moment of the episode. But it's hilarious because, like, the other members of the team are just, like, practicing, and then Zihao's just chilling there with the masters like they're best buddies. And then the master's like, oh, Zihao, can't you see what's, like, wrong about this? And, like, pats Zihao on the back, and Zihao's like, yeah, you're right. It's just absolutely hilarious, like, how godly Zihao was in this show. Next is Surin. He was given some small criticisms over his vocal part, which he hilariously did not add a choreography to, even after being told to, but was praised in the actual performance, including for his vocals, as they want him to be a lead vocalist to back up Hengyu. Same with the other two centers, they were generally shown to be skilled. Next is Hengyu. He was arguably the second biggest winner in this group. He was, of course, shown to be skilled and was praised for his rap, since Mnet need to remind you that they initially pitched him as an all-rounder. He was also shown to be a great mentor for Chawi, picking up a second baby, I guess, as he consistently encouraged him to challenge himself and do better. He also comforted Chawi multiple times. Chawi was the single biggest winner of this performance, duh. He got by far the most screen time and was given a classic lacking confidence arc. You all were concerned about his skills last week? Well, this is Mnet telling you that you should shut up. He is shoved into the ace role but takes it selflessly for the good of his team and then worries about living up to expectations and feels sorry about letting Hengyu, the god, down. He is criticised hugely in the interim, which is followed by even more criticism of him as he seems to do everything wrong. This leads into a mental breakdown where he just kind of wants to give up, but Hengyu, and to a lesser extent the rest of the team, point out to him that he just needs to work and how good this opportunity is for him. This leads into a segment filled with motivational music where he stays up practicing all night and talks about how he wants to improve himself. In the actual performance, there are massive cheers for him, and he gets the classic Soyeon/Wee flashback to his struggles in practice before he executes his part well. He's praised a ton and is especially praised after the performance for actually being a decent performer and for his hard work. Although he's criticised by the fans, which makes sense because they don't know anything about him, don't necessarily like him, and don't know why he was in the team, he wins and gets to reflect on how thankful he is for the opportunity and how he'll work on his confidence. This completes his arc. As far as neutral people, Hanwin made some mistakes, had some good moments, was competent enough to not let Zihao down, and that's what Mnet cares about. Guangxu, I actually think he's a mini loser. He was shown making mistakes and was chewed out a bunch in the interim, but he just didn't get enough screen time for it to really be worth the time. So yeah, this was the big Chowie redemption arc, featuring the three centers who are gods now and can basically do no wrong. Even their failures are just minor setbacks on their path to debut. Also, did you notice that they pointed out how the other teams were practicing at this time, which suggests that another mission was being practiced at the same time? I.e. that the God's Menu people would have had less time to practice their mission songs and less time to practice God's Menu. Just food for thought because Mnet would rather you ignored that. So regarding the ISTJ win, this was slightly surprising, but at the same time not really. What wasn't surprising was Hengyu winning, since he's seemingly the most popular trainee on the show, likely by a country mile. What was a bit surprising was that his popularity seemingly eclipses the combined popularity of Surin and Guangxu and Hanwen and Zihao, which is impressive. Everyone and their mum knows that Hengyu likely carried Cha Wei and was the only reason ISTJ won, but Mnet would have you believe that Chowie earned it with his hard work based on the edit. This isn't Chowie hate, I'm just pointing out how Mnet likely changed the facts to suit their narrative. Even Chowie probably knows that he was carried, but he was asked in confessionals to speak about it like he was the one who won. Anyway, Zihao and Surin get to be sorry for their teammates and their fans, which is just more screen time for them. And then we get the teaser for the pre-finale elimination next week, where I imagine they intend to get rid of a lot of the trainees they don't like. All of HOT are up for elimination, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mnet pull out some BS mentor vote or something that lets them eliminate everyone except for Surin and Shunyu. I mean, it would kill two birds with one stone, eliminating Guangxu and Yichen in one go pre-finale. Looking back, I'm actually really surprised that they didn't do this. Like, I'm genuinely shocked that there weren't, like, some producer picks in this episode. I know that Mnet have been shying away from producer picks more after the scandal, but, like, this is some random wacky spin off. I don't think that anyone is, like, really that concerned about producer pick riggery in home race of all places. Um, this was their chance to eliminate Yichen and Guangxu, and they didn't do it. Therefore, death for Mnet. Alright, Mnet's ideal lineup. So now that we have a potentially expanding lineup, we have to consider things as Mnet would. Who are their ideal core, and who are their stretch/filler members? Thankfully for me, not only is this pretty easy to see, but it's also basically what I wrote last episode. The mandatory core, first is Hengyu. I think either he or Surin are their desired center. Surin, see above. Zihao is the desired leader, and then there's Zei. The mandatory core are balanced skill-wise and are arguably the foremost skilled trainees on the show. They also come pre-packaged with variety skill, visuals, and stage presence. This is like the strongest four-member group that you could create out of this 18-person lineup. Next is the stretch lineup and their potential roles in the group. With the stretch lineup, Mnet only need to supplement skills since nothing is missing in the core. I think they would be happy with pretty much any combination of these people making up the rest of the group. First is Shunyu. I promoted him from last week. He would be there for dance and variety. He would be the maknae. His age is suitable for this group, which will have a lighter concept than Aldi 1. And he's cute. But I suppose that they'll also pull a Hybe and make him a sexy maknae like Nikki and Maki. Frowny face, depressed face, whatever you want to call this emoji. They bypassed a sexy kid in Aldi 1, so here we go again. What I mean by that is Mnet like really like having a sexy maknae who's like 15 years old. They didn't have one in Aldi 1, like we were blessedly spared. So I was like, maybe they want to do it this time. Next is Jack. He would be here for variety and international appeal. He would be a sub/lead rapper to Zihao's main rapper. Next is Bowen. He would be here for dance and a lead vocalist to supplement Hengyu's main vocal position. He's basically the next most ideal person to add to the core, but I don't know if Mnet like him enough for that. Next is Chowie. He would be there for visuals and maybe vocals. This makes up an 8-member group, and although I do doubt that this is their complete ideal lineup, I do think it would be pretty balanced, and the filler members would allow the core to shine. Shunyu supports Surin, Jack supports Zihao, and Bowen supports Hengyu. Even Chowie supports Zei in the time-honoured tradition of looking pretty. Okay, now for the more unfortunate souls. Here are the like neutral edit people, a la Gyuvin, Sanghyun, etc. First is Hanwon, who got downgraded, RIP. Next is Kristen and Hanyu, people they don't want. I downgraded 3 of these. Oh no, sorry, I downgraded 2 of these. So I downgraded Binghua and Mingche, and I upgraded Dang Hong Hai and Sike. And then kill them now, says Mnet metaphorically. Guangxu, Yichen, De, and Zisho, who I downgraded. He was literally so invisible that I even forgot he existed and almost forgot to add him to my list. Yeah, like I wrote this list out and I counted it, and there were 17 people, and I was like, who did I miss? And it was him, because he was so forgettable. Alright, Actually, no, before I go into conclusions, I would stick with this. Uh, I would say obviously they wanted the mandatory core. Considering they knew that they were likely to have a 6 or 7 member lineup, um, I think they would have gone for Chowie, Bowen, and Shunyu, maybe. Chowie and Bowen, definitely. Chowie is the fifth person. I may as well say this now. My uh, final conclusions from this show were that there's the mandatory core, Chowie is the fifth person they wanted, and then Shunyu and Bowen would be good to have as the next two to make up the 7 member group they'd get. Jack and Hanwen are both people who they'd much rather have in the group over Yichen and Guangxu. So I guess we should look at in the end. Out of modesty, how happy were they? Very happy, very happy, very happy. Okay, so yeah, top three Hengy's. I forgot this is, you're not watching this video, you can't see what I'm doing. Top three Hengyu, Z, Zihao, Mnet are having a party. As far as Guangxu not having a party, Mnet are depressed. Surin, Mnet are partying again. Yichen, Mnet are depressed again. At least he's under Wake 1, like he's better than Guangxu. Chowie, Mnet are partying. So they got 5 people they like and 2 people they really don't like. That's a bit awkward for them. Like, it's not like Aldi 1 where they got 6 people they really like and then 2 people they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. They were just not happy with Yichen and Guangxu. But there's only so much they could do about this. You know, if you get 5 million points, you get 5 million points, right? Um, the extra stretch members allowed them to get Chowie, which they're very happy with. It also allowed them to get Yichen. So was it worth it in the end? Mm, I'd say yes. Mnet probably think yes. Um, if they could have, obviously considering the fact that Bowen got eliminated earlier and other people got eliminated earlier, if they could have, I reckon they would have switched out Guangxu and Yichen for Bowen and maybe Shunyu. Um, as far as, since I'm here, I'll talk about this now. Predictions for the final group. Honestly, I'm surprised that Zihao hasn't been labeled the leader yet. I'm surprised they haven't made that announcement yet. Uh, I would be shocked if the leader was anyone other than Zihao. Like, my jaw would be on the floor. I would be losing it more than the Enhypen fans lost it when Heesung wasn't the leader. Will they treat Hengyu as a center? Uh, I actually think there's a very high chance that they do. I think that's very likely. Although this group does not have an official center. If you look at their profiles, people have written that Hengyu's the center, but they never said that he would be, so too bad, so sad. The core 4 are getting the majority of the lines, and the other 3 are gonna suffer, especially Yichen and Guangxu. This is why I said only vote them in if you're prepared for them to be treated poorly, because there is a 99.99999% chance that Guangxu and Yichen get nothing, right? Just prepare yourselves mentally. And this being under NCC, I don't really know what to expect. Let's hope there's lots of Zihao. Alright, let me just finish up this part. Alright, part 6, conclusions. And people said they didn't like Chowie. Next week is the Elimination and Sports Day episode, so likely will be light on Riggery, unless they include tons of behind the scenes for the final mission with the new songs. This is a super sped up timeline, so I'm curious to see what those results are for the final group. Also, will they go directly from a 5-pick to a 1-pick? That seems dangerous, unless the extra seats in the finale are producer picks, which they hadn't announced, so they could well have done that, and I don't know why they didn't. Anyway, all I can say is that I hope Bowen is on the rise. He's been praised a lot here and was since the start of Boys to Planet. He's one that I initially suspected could have been one of, or even the Mnet of, the original C group, so I can only hope, please Mnet, that he debuts here. And of course, no one can stop Zihao from being a king forever. Seriously, this show is just the Zihao praise show, the same way that Island 2 was the Jimin praise show. Chawi equals Sohye? See you next week. Don't forget, a Zihao a day keeps Mnet away. Just kidding, Mnet likes Zihao, they flock to him. A Hanyu a day keeps Mnet's cameraman away? Okay, so I was right that going from a 5 pick to a 1 pick was dangerous. Uh, I was not right about Bowen. I mean, I was not right because I didn't realize that the ranks had been leaked and he was eliminated. But the only reason he was eliminated was because Drama Team didn't win. Mnet, I don't know why I didn't discuss it here, but out of ISTJ, Hot, and Drama, Mnet wanted Drama Team to win. They wanted ISTJ second and Hot last. I think Mnet were basically assuming that that Drama Team would win, and that would save Bowen, but they didn't, like, Drama Team didn't win, therefore there was nothing Mnet could really do about Bowen. That said though, as Mnet made sure to point out multiple times, Bowen got enough votes to survive. So you could tell that Mnet were upset about that because they kept pointing it out. Every time they point out that someone, like, quote unquote, unfairly survived because they pushed someone else out, they, like, emphasize it so much because they like the person who got shoved out. The recent example of this I discussed was Guy and Sierra on Produce 101. They were like, Sierra pushed someone out, and then they highlighted that Guy was the last trainee to, like, the top trainee who got eliminated. So you can tell that they were, like, super pissed that they couldn't rig Guy in. And you can tell that they were really upset that Bowen and Binghua didn't survive the next episode. I mean, not so much Binghua, but, like, if they'd only focused on Bowen, it would have looked weird. And they certainly like Binghua more than several other trainees on the show, so it makes sense. Alright, let's talk comments. I completely agree with this person that, like, a lot of us weren't convinced that we would get 1 pick in the week leading up to the finale because, like all of us are saying, it literally just, like, it's so unsafe going from a 5 pick to a 1 pick when you don't know what the 1 pick of these fandoms is like. So it makes sense that they didn't do a 1 pick. There's this one random person who was, like, not very impressed with Zihao's editing. Yeah. People were telling me about Bowen being eliminated, bad times. I am not convinced about this. So this person says that Hengyu picked Chawi because he knew that people would vote for him because of visuals, or that people were voting for him because of visuals. Hengyu could well have thought that the general public would vote for visuals, but he wouldn't have thought that Chawi was, like, a rising star or anything like that, because literally no content from the show had been released so far, so he would have had no way to know that. Everyone's laughing about Zihao's portrayal because it's just so wacko. Ah, here's the picture. Oh, what's this guy's? This is, like, Youngjung, right? That's what his name is. Um, like, was this not, like, I cackled so much watching this. He's just, like, he's even got, like, the sweater pause thing going on. He's like, hey, my buddy Zihao, like, you and I are best bros, we're equals. Mentor with me, tell these plebs that they can't dance properly. it was great. This was my favorite, probably my favorite moment in the show. Um, oh yeah, Youngjin, that's his name. All right. Now let's get into the third post. Apologies for the late post. I've been effectively working every day since the episode, so only have just had time to post. But on the bright side, this has given more time for things like interim results to come out. If I remember correctly, when did I post this? Oh, I posted this on Boxing Day, but I think it was like the day before the finale because the previous 6 days, like I literally worked all day every day, and then I was like at a food bank on Christmas and everything. Like, seriously, when I say I had zero time to write this post, I had zero time to write this post. Part one is the intro. The documentary section starts with Zihao, Zei, and Chaoyi, making them more salient to the audience and showing how Mnet likes them. The whole segment, as usual, has a nice hopeful tone. The intro section includes Zihao yelling at Zei and the affirmation that yes, Zei's visuals are actually good enough to get him into the group, even if he had no skills. So Mnet are very clearly like, you just vote for this guy, guys. Hengyu and Chaoyi are also called the main characters of ISTJ, and most importantly, the Queen Xiaoting makes her glorious return. Second is the sports day, and I was very happy to see Donghyun back at it. Kangmin was of course chosen to get more viewers on this show, and also for the mandatory Hengyu drama. I have no clue what happened to Gaehyun. Like, where was he? Anyway, Mnet likes Zihao so much that the quiz question is literally about Zihao. Insane. Also, isn't jumping in acupressure shoes legitimately dangerous, or am I just paranoid? Anyway, this sports segment gives us a lot of screen time for Zihao, Chaoyi, Hingyu, Surin, Jack, and Bowen. Wow, what a shocker. Third, the eliminations and rankings. Again, lots of screen time for Hengyu, Surin, and Zihao. Check. The structure of this announcement, 6 survivors from the top teams, then the team ranking, then other survivors, then the top 6, is a bit of a mix-up from previous seasons, but nothing too dramatic. It's arguably more similar to Island 2 or Girls Planet than Boys Planet 1 or Boys 2 Planet though. Well, I was just really happy to see so many little things from Girls Planet returning for this one. So maybe this is the non-binary season of Boys Planet or Planet 999. Anyway, here are my notes. Zihao is announced first, thus he's salient, and is praised tons for his leadership and teamwork. Chaoyi is now someone the other trainees view as popular and is highlighted for his visuals again. Jack's improvement is highlighted. Surin gets to be scared about whether he'll survive or not, and gets to worry about his poor leadership, which left his team in third place. Yeah, according to Mnet's drama, he was the sole cause of his team's downfall, even though he was definitely the one who carried them. And here are my thoughts on the rankings that we were told. Hingyu was first, no surprises, he was always the highest ranking trainee of this group. Yeah, because I still can't. I feel like I'm flip-flopping. I don't know who was ranked higher in the original show. Yeah, okay, Hingyu wasn't always the highest ranked trainee in this group, in that he was the second highest ranked in the original show, but he was pretty consistently first in this show. Second, Zei, ahem, Rigori, ahem. I mean, he was always popular, but he wasn't second because, like, he wasn't second without the Rigori. Third was Zihao, Slay. Fourth was Hanwen. I guess he got himself a really dedicated fan base on Boys 2 Planet. Fifth was Guangxu, and Mnet cried a little. Sixth was Surin, and Mnet cried a little for a completely different reason. We always knew that Surin had the smallest one pick of the 3 centres, and that he was the one who was eliminated the soonest too, so is clearly the least popular. 7th is Yichen, 8th is Chaoyi, Rigori, 9th is Dang Hong Hai, he was higher than I thought, 10th was Bowen, meh face. 11th was Jack, who was lower than I thought, and 12th was Binghua, slay child. With Mingche in 16 and Kristen in 17, unsurprising considering their invisibility. Now, the case of Bowen. A lot of people last week were telling me about how Bowen had been eliminated and questioning whether Mnet wanted him if they never showed an interim for him. And while I do agree with you that a lack of an interim is somewhat inconsistent with Mnet's like of him, and thus agree that I likely overestimated their like for him, I still think they did want him, and I'll show you why. First, Mnet have not shown interims before for trainees they like. If they think they're 1, too low to survive / it's hopeless, or 2, they want to keep people they don't like out of the final group. We saw both of these happen in the Boys 2 Planet finale. The problem with Bowen was that, despite Mnet's best efforts, ISTJ team won, so Bowen wasn't automatically safe and needed to be in the top 6 of the elimination candidates. And while Bowen is certainly far from the bottom in terms of popularity, he's also decently far from the top. In hot and drama teams, we have a set of trainees who are pretty freaking popular. Zihao, Zei, Hanwen, Surin, Guangshu, and Yichen. And what do you know, those were the people who survived. The likelihood of Bowen taking over any of these trainees was next to impossible, and showing an interim would likely have made the fans of those trainees, especially Hanwen and Yichen, whose fans would have known they were lower than the other 4, vote harder, making it even less likely that Bowen would be in the top 6. So there was basically zero chance of Bowen making it in by votes. His only chance was to have his team ranked first, which is what Mnet wanted. They wanted drama first, as far as I can tell at least. The biggest issue here is clearly the way that Mnet decided to run this mission, which really shot them in the foot. They have a less popular trainee they like, or at least view positively, in each of the groups. Jack in ISTJ, Bowen in drama, and Shunyu in hot. Each of these trainees, especially Jack and Shunyu, is likely to be shoved out of the top 12 if their group doesn't come first, so all 3 of them needed to come first to be guaranteed to survive. Duh. Which means that Mnet were pretty likely to lose 2 of them either way. They'd previously announced the deal for this mission, so they couldn't just produce a pick Bowen, lest they be accused of Ryuri. Now, you may say, oh, but if they knew this kind of structure had a chance of backfiring, why would they even make this the mission structure to begin with? Well, that's pretty simple. I think it's pretty obvious from the way this show is being run that Mnet basically couldn't care less about this group. Like, they obviously do have an ideal lineup and they have a concept in mind and they want people to watch the show. And they'll even continue their riggery tactics like the 50-50 vote ratio, but like, look at the budget, the organisation, the everything. They don't care about this show, and more so than a good group, what they really want from this show is drama and suspense. Hence, this is the best time to change things up and give up some control in favour of keeping viewers and trainees confused, through things like increasing debut numbers, etc. Anyway, in more notes, you can clearly tell that they like Bowen because he got a lot of screen time in this episode and got the same sympathetic edit that Mnet give to trainees they like who are about to get eliminated. Let me explain. They show all of the other trainees talking about him like he'll survive, showing how the others have faith in him and his popularity and assume he will live. This is a pretty big peer endorsement because it basically tells the audience that it would be ridiculous if he didn't survive. They show Binghua and the other trainees getting worried about him and his stress. This, combined with shots of Bowen looking on the verge of death, show the audience that he's just a cute little sad kid who you should want to protect and make happy. You, the audience, are cruel for eliminating him. Everyone is always praying for him. Better yet, Mnet explicitly mentioned that Bowen and Binghua were in the survival ranks, but were pushed out, and they explicitly mentioned that Kristen and Mingche were the ones who did the pushing. This creates a sense of injustice that Bowen, and to a lesser extent Binghua, should have survived, but didn't because of those dastardly, undeserving ISTJ losers. This is basically designed to make the audience see Mingche and Kristen in a poor light, and is a borderline evil edit. It also, again, makes the audience more protective of Bowen. They show that Hanwen and Bowen wanted, and even expected, to spend Christmas together on the show. This makes the audience sad that they didn't get to be together for a day which is, for most people watching, one of, if not the most important day of the year. Bowen is also the first of the eliminated trainees who is shown reflecting on his time on the show, and is given the longest reflection segment, making him salient and making his elimination seem even more tragic. And this tactic is something that they use a lot with trainees they like who get eliminated early. They're usually the first person who reflects. In comparison to Yichen and Binghua, the other two final spot candidates, Bowen is shown to be more skilled and his skills are shown more often and for longer, making it seem like he's the most worthy of the three. So, Mnet, by doing that, they're kind of implying that, like, Yichen was another person who got in unjustly. TLDW, I am definitely biased, but I still think it's clear that Mnet liked Bowen on this show, and in this episode we're basically pointing a finger at the audience, saying you guys are idiots for eliminating this kid. 5. The concept/debut song mission. This is the mission where you can really tell that Mnet just do not care about this show. If they actually cared about the show, they'd do what they usually do and make the trainees sort themselves based on rank, which would result in the higher ranking trainees being evenly distributed, and in better parts where they could shine more. But instead, they go for the screen time/meme potential method, i.e. picking teammates based on senses. At least even then, Mnet still have control by giving the top-ranked trainees, Z and Hengyu, power. Also note Zihao being a senior to Cherryyoung, reinforcing yet again his experience and how he should basically be a master. Hey, fun fact, while Yumeki and Hui's skills were used to discredit them as too skilled for the group, both Yujin and Zihao's, and Shinlong's, excessive skills and experience were painted as acceptable for the final group because they were still growing. For all three of them, this was largely through leadership, and for Shinlong and Yujin, in confidence. It's a subtle and kind of hard to notice distinction, but it's definitely there. I would say it's the most obvious between Hui and Shinlong especially. Yeah, I mean, when Hui and Shinlong both went on their respective seasons of Boys Planet, they both have, like, a decade or more of experience with combined training and idolhood. They're both in groups which had, like, massive popularity and then kind of fell off. They've both arguably had, like, I mean, Shinlong's done a little bit of songwriting, right? They're both portrayed to be, like, incredibly skilled. So what's the difference? Well, according to Mnet, he's all old and depressed, and he's gonna crumble into dust because he's a grandpa, and he's weird and insecure, and, like, why is he on this show? But oh my goodness, Shinlong, he's got, like, so much growing to do. He's so nice to the younger trainees or the less experienced trainees. He just wants to do what's best for the fans. He's not doing it selfishly for himself and his group. Da 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 da. Like, considering the parallels between them, the different portrayal of Hui and Shinlong is an amazing case study into how Mnet really do edit reality. Like, Hui and Shinlong were probably experiencing very similar emotions and everything on the show. But Mnet was like, yeah, we like this guy and we don't like this guy, so anyway. The riggery is relatively light in both this selection section and the killing part selection, but here are my notes regardless. Suren and Zihao are doing soulmates things and are literally the two most desirable trainees for Z and Hengyu to add to their teams. The two fight over Ziren, and Z literally collapses on the floor in sadness when Hengyu picks Zihao. That is how much they're desired. I mean, it was probably partially for content, but my point still stands. They also are, as usual, great at creating content and square up for a rap battle which is sure to make a shipper swoon. Speaking of creating content, Zihao spraying other contestants with his perfume is great content. Zei and Jack are friends. This is a good association for Jack, which will likely turn Zei into Jack's parent figure. Guangxu is a weird one. At this point, I think Mnet have accepted him for the group and certainly want him more than Yichen, but they're letting the audience know that they're not too happy about this. They show how Zei wanted him in his team, but they keep making Guangxu, like, slightly off-putting. For instance, in this case, by showing consistent comments about his smell, which is implied to be disgusting. These are the kinds of things which will make audiences subconsciously dislike a trainee, and in Guangxu's case, if Mnet have already shown him to be unskilled, and they haven't really shown him to have a good personality, All he has is his visuals, right? But if they then show that he has bad hygiene slash smells bad, well, that really takes away from the visuals, right? So at this point, Mnet are basically implying that he's completely useless and has literally nothing going for him. Also note that they showed that Zihao could get by on nothing but his visuals, but he's still skilled, while they haven't shown the same for Guangzhou. Rip. Once Surin and Zihao, i.e. the most desirable trainees, have been picked, there's basically no one else who's super important, so Mnet fast forward the rest of the section, which was so blatant it was funny. For selecting killing parts, etc., here are my notes. So for multiple seasons we've had temporary killing parts whose final role is selected by the audience, yet for some reason the trainees are still surprised that they need to choose 2 killing parts who will be voted on by the audience. Hello? Do you all have amnesia? Or is the lack of schooling of an idol trainee really getting to you all? Dang Hong Hai is still getting the no one wants or needs you edit, rip. Hanwen and Mingche are shown stuffing up lyrics. Mingche and Kristen also make vocal mistakes, but Hanwen doesn't, which leaves him with the main vocal position. Hanwen is given a chance to explain himself as being a slow learner and is shown improving after his mistake, while Mingche and Kristen aren't, further discrediting them in relation to Hanwen and Bowen. Zihao appeals to the fans again, talking about how he wants to please them. He's then given the killing part unanimously and is praised by his teammates. 0 surprises. Guangxu surprises people with his dance skills, but doesn't get the killing part and says that it's destiny while complaining. I think the complaining makes him look bad, and also that him saying it's fate that he gets nothing is basically saying he's destined for nothing, i.e. destined to not debut. Suren is complimented a lot. Actually, I noticed this hilarious thing. He has his jumper on by only one sleeve, which looks like a normal K-pop fashion choice, but also conveniently hides his tattoos. Also, he's a cut sleeve again. And Suren and Zihao have a dramatic love-hate DID relationship. Hengyu's team killing parts are Zihao and Mingche. Mingche has a literal negative chance of winning against Zihao. Z's team's killing parts are Surin and Z. This is a more even battle. Z has more popularity, but Surin will be given a boost by the interim results, so I guess we'll see. And then the episode ends off with the typical pre-finale dramatic motivational teaser. Who will debut? Tune in next week to find out, and make sure you keep voting, being emotionally invested, and buying our products. Anyway, I do have a few other things to discuss as usual. Number 6 is the 10 votes. Bwahaha, I was right. And so were some of you who commented about the vote numbers under my previous posts. Looking at the voting instructions at the end of the episode reveals that Mnet wanted the final round of voting to be 3-pick, which, while unprecedented in produce, is in line with what I and many others have been saying, that 3-pick is safest for them if they want to do what the show has been doing so far, keep the status quo. A 3-pick means that Surin, Zihao, Z, and Hengyu, their core 4, are advantaged and more likely to debut than they would with a 1-pick. However, when you go into the Mnet Plus app and go to vote, it's even more than this. It gives you the choice to vote, up to 3 trainees a day, 10 times per day. Literally 30 votes per person per day. Insane. This signals to me a few things. First, Mnet really want to maintain the status quo of their top 4, and they want to give the fans an even greater chance to do this, but they also want fans to have the opportunity to vote for other Mnet picks like Chowie, who will become an easier filler now that fans have more votes. Even beyond this, it signals to me that Mnet have decided that, based on the current rankings, they want an 8-member group. After a few weeks of voting, the fans only accumulated enough votes for 1 extra seat, but instead of reducing the number of possible votes per day, Mnet massively increased it, showing that they do want an 8-member group. But why? Well, they've probably accepted Guangxu at this point, and may have accepted Yichen, but more likely, they know that Yichen has a strong 1-pick but a weaker multi-pick. Hence, there is a decent likelihood that Yichen is thrown out by Chowie, and maybe by someone with more general likability like Jack Rising. Okay, so as far as all this, I was absolutely right that Chowie would rise with a higher number of votes, and in fact, the higher number of votes is probably the only thing that saved him. I was right that Yi Chen would fall. I mean, fall's a bit of a strong word because I think he was in the same ranking. Um, but he like only just survived. And I think he mostly survived because of the middle of the episode interim they did, which was a dumb choice by Mnet. Um, I reckon the reason they decided to go for the 8 member group after episode 3 was because Bowen got eliminated. And if he was going to be like the lead vocalist backing up Hengyu, what do you do now? Well, who's another well-known vocalist on this show who Mnet have shown that they don't dislike? Ah, Hanwen. OMG. More spots in the group means more chance of Hanwen, right? Especially considering they would have been able to see at this point that he was dropping, and they also would have known, well, if Yichen and Guangxu both make it in, which it's looking like at this point, rip Mnet, um, we need an extra space if we're going to have both Chawi and Hanwen, right? That's my hypothesis. Am I right? I don't know. Believe it or not, I'm not Mnet. Anyway, more importantly, interim ranks. Mnet published a set of interim ranks on the 24th, which revealed that, in no particular order, the trainees in ranks 9 to 12 were Kristen, Mingche, Surin, and Jack, which, just as Mnet intended it, freaked everyone out. This was hilariously obvious because Mnet almost certainly had someone sitting staring at stats all day, waiting for the moment that one of their top 4 slipped out of the top 8 or some other shocking result happened, ready to press publish on the post the moment it happened. Suren was likely 9th and only had like 2 votes between him and 8th place. So the obvious result of this will be that Suren and likely Jack too will rise. There's a small likelihood of Kristen and Mingche also rising, although I don't really think they have the fandom for it. This also means that there is a larger likelihood of Suren and Jack pushing out Yichen. Alright, the teaser. So the teaser for episode 4 starts with Christmas, which is supposed to make you happy, and also supposed to make you forget that these trainees are spending Christmas not with their family and friends, but inside an Mnet torture chamber. Then we get teasers of them watching embarrassing videos from their past. Note that Zihao, Surin, and Hengyu are prioritized. And then we have the sad crying of Surin and Zihao to make you vote for them. Also, Hanwen cries and gets a lot of screen time in this teaser, which backs up my hypothesis that once they saw that both Yichen and Guangxu were likely to make it, they started prioritizing Hanwen more. Oh, and once Bowen got eliminated, they started prioritizing Hanwen more. You can see this working on people because all of the comments are about Zihao crying and wanting Surin and Zihao to debut together, so keep that in mind. Alright, Mnet's top ranking. I now believe that Mnet's initial lineup was a 6-member group with Hengyu, Surin, Zihao, Zei, Bowen, and Chawi, which is a nice and balanced lineup. But you see, Bowen has been eliminated and Mnet are sad, and they also know the likelihood of a Guangxu debut is large, so they've been forced to adjust. Luckily for them, this is a project they don't really care about. What I think they want now is an 8-member lineup. Hengyu, Surin, Zihao, Zei, Chawi, Guangxu, who they don't want but grudgingly accept. They need to have the lineup expanded if they want to have Chawi/Jack have a chance of debut with Guangxu also in the lineup, hence they have allowed extra votes to happen. Hanwen, new. Lots of screen time shown crying given the ability to explain himself, main vocal to go with Hengyu and replace Bowen. And then Jack. Yup. Next, my predictions for the following week. Not that they're particularly exciting, but still. I think, considering the number of votes being cast, the group will have 8 members. I also think that Hengyu is likely to be rank 1. There is a small possibility of Zihao. I think Yichen is pretty likely to debut, which would result in the mandatory 2 members that Mnet don't like making the final group, Yichen and Guangxu. Hence, I predict that these two will be treated poorly in the final group. I also predict that this group will have a similar contract to Aldi1, but that they will be pretty nugu, treated poorly and underpromoted, and that they will basically go radio silent after a few years, then quietly disband at the end of their contract period, after which Hengyu will become a soloist with almost no popularity, Zihao will become an MC/influencer, and everyone else will basically drop off the map. Sorry to be so pessimistic, but I just have a feeling, especially considering how experimental and low budget/low effort this show has been. Dare I say this show is even more experimental than Girls' Planet? Mnet's Sinophobia strikes again. Alright, so let's talk about this. 8 members. I was incorrect. However, I don't feel too bad about this, if nothing else, because in episode 1 I said that it would be 7 members, if we're lucky. So I predicted it in episode 1, but then I changed my prediction, so do with that what you will. Hengyu rank 1, yes, I was right. Yichen is likely to debut, and Yichen and Guangxu will debut, yes. Those two will be treated poorly in the final group. I mean, we don't know yet, but I'll stick by that prediction. A similar contract to Aldi1. Yes, I was correct. Pretty Nugu treated poorly, whatever. It's a bit too early to tell, but I'll still stick by this prediction. If I remember correctly, and I guess we'll have a look in a moment, a lot of people in the comments were like, "You're so pessimistic about this group, I actually think they'll do really well." I mean, it depends a lot on their management and promotion, but like, I genuinely don't think that Mnet or even NCC really care enough about this group to promote them well. They'll probably just be like a mini cash cow and that's it. The only thing that makes me hopeful is the fact that 3RACHA are producing the debut song. That makes me think that some effort and money has been invested into this group. Like, the fact that they're getting such well-known boy group producers to do the debut song makes me feel like maybe there's a tiny bit of hope, but I'm still not convinced, especially since I have massively disliked most of the stuff that 3RACHA have put out lately. Alright, conclusions. Just remember that this is all, basically, a very expensive game to Mnet, so as usual, try not to get too emotionally invested to the point where your happiness rides on a trainee's debut or lack of debut. When I say it's a very expensive game, I don't mean that Mnet aren't taking it seriously, because obviously they are. Like, obviously they want to have a return on investment and everything. What I mean is that Mnet are pulling the strings behind everything, therefore it's like a game, and we don't have any control. At the end of the day, we have very little control over all of this, and although it may be unjust, it is not your fault that a trainee didn't debut. Although, if a trainee didn't debut, the only solution is to vote harder. But it's not your individual fault, it's the fandom's fault. Additionally, although this is likely one of the best opportunities each of these trainees will have in the industry, which is sad considering how pessimistic I am about the final group, it is not the only opportunity and does not mean automatic death for trainees. Sure, some of the eliminated trainees will choose to leave the idle life, but that doesn't automatically mean that all of their dreams are destroyed and hopeless. It just means they'll reevaluate and head on a different path. But on the bright side, a critical Zihao a day keeps Mnet away. I thought this was absolutely a correct prediction, saying that the person who was in 8th place, who Suren would push out, is Deng Honghai. I mean, it must have been, like, who else would it be? So he basically got rigged out. I mean, if he was in 8th, he wouldn't have debuted, but he got rigged out. Here are obviously people's predictions. People predicting Chowie. I think this is definitely true. I mean, I don't think this is like, this is a pretty obvious prediction, but that doesn't mean that it's incorrect, because it was absolutely correct that, like, you know, Chowie, he's the same as, like, Bahie, Sohye, etc. Like, you get to debut, but the cost is extreme hate. Do you take that deal? Do you take the Mnet poisoned apple and get rigged? I mean, Bahie wasn't rigged. But do you take the apple and get rigged, or do you just suffer by not debuting, but you don't get hate? Let's talk about the final episode, episode 4. Here we are at the end. Thank goodness, with Boys to Planet, Steel Heart Club, ahem, reminds me of Heartsteel, Hip Hop Princess, Yeehaw Yuju, and Home Race airing basically back to back, combined with me watching Produce 101 Season 1 for the first time. Even though I didn't watch all of these shows, just the thought of them was exhausting, especially combined with my growing pessimism for this season's final group. I'll be glad to have a mini break from Mnet and return to the safety and sanctity of Season 1. But that doesn't mean there aren't still riggery lessons to be learned. First, the intro. Okay, so first of all, the only option for the English subtitles was AI generated, which, ugh. On one hand, out of all of the uses for AI, I do think that breaking down language barriers and making content in different languages more accessible is one of the more noble uses, but even so, it's still terrible, and it doesn't understand all of the intricacies of language and translation the same way humans do. Not to mention that the AI made tons of mistakes while translating, like it called the participants monkeys at one point, constantly named the wrong people, and said that only 10 million votes were needed for each increase in the lineup, not 20 million. Anyway, the stage was depressing and tiny, and the audience was so unresponsive. Jaejung had to keep prompting the audience to cheer. And I don't know if he was tired or put off by the audience or what, but he kept making mistakes and seemed really off for some reason. Anyway, the intros where the trainees are in the audience really seems like the intro to some boxing or wrestling match. I say as someone who doesn't watch either of those sports. It just seems to have that vibe. Anyway, because this is the end, they need to say something nice about each trainee, even the ones they don't like. My notes here were that Jack is a cutie, Surin was labelled as an all-rounder, and Zayi was given the Shinlong hexagonal idol label. It was also really nice to see at least a few cheers for every contestant. But the Mnet app said there were only like 65,000 people watching, which was sad. Next, the voting and the masters. So, live voting was one pick, and live votes counted 5 times, which is clearly Mnet integrating their final one pick drama into the show regardless and upping the stakes. Oh, speaking of, I completely forgot when I wrote this post, but I predicted that uh they may have like they'd have 3 pick for the finale, but they might have one pick voting in the actual finale. Wow, slay. This makes me imagine that they had some kind of data which would make them think that one pick in the finale would be better for their ideal lineup. I don't know why, but sure. I voted for Surin because may as well. I knew that my actual one pick Zihao would be fine. I mean, I knew Surin would be fine too, but I guess I wanted to jump on the Surin hype train while it was happening. Also, Xiaoting returns! Heya! Interestingly and somewhat unsurprisingly, they've given her a less idol-like and more mature business-like outfit, since she's now a master, not a guest idol. This makes her look older and more experienced, someone to be looked up to as a teacher, not just an idol. It was also nice to see One Star talking about the importance of music across languages and regions. This is what Planet 999 should be and was originally advertised as, but of course Mnet doesn't like that. This section also features a lot of Jaejung blabbing about random voting things without actually telling us anything about the votes. Next, the Doko section, mandatory. Started with Hengyu, our desired centre, or centre candidate with Zayi for salience, followed by Zayi and Zihao. This section emphasises training time, which really shocked me. Like, Kristen's been training for 5,000 days? Actually, now that I think about that, is that even possible? At least Zihao's 3,000 days makes sense with him being in Boy Story. Surin also gets a sob story about his, quote, darkest moment and being the main dancer on Boys to Planet C. I also noted that this section looked like it was super low budget, but also I noted that Dang Hong Hai was speaking in Korean, which may have been to appeal to Korean voters. Honestly, there could have been others who also spoke in Korean, I just didn't notice them specifically. I'd say it's a smart move by him, like you should always appeal to the Korean audience if you can. Next to the interim. So this show has a finale interim, bringing us back to the good old days of produce. The finale interim is that the three candidates for sixth place, i.e., places 6, 7, and 8, are Yichen, Chaoyi, and Hanwen. This seems like a pointless reveal since it was pretty likely that all three would debut with the expanding lineup anyway. I was also confused about Mnet's choice to reveal Yichen since they would surely know that it would lead people to panic vote for him. Yeah, I mean, if I was Mnet, I would have just shown Chaoyi and Hanwen, but I don't know what was going on then. There. Or it could have been what I was about to say. But maybe Chaoyi and Hanwen, especially Chaoyi, were both worth it? I don't know, this is one of the few interims which confuses me. They could have easily revealed Hanwen and Chaoyi without Yichen, and I don't think anyone in their right mind would argue that Mnet actually want Yichen. Were they trying to then imply that he was in the debut lineup and have Hanwen, Chaoyi, and Surin fans vote him out? I don't know. I also thought it was hilarious that when Jing mentioned the potential centers of Revenant, literally everyone in the audience was screaming for Zihao. Slay. Next, the party for the Masters, the interim, and letters. Youngjun's birthday shenanigans. Since this was filmed the day after his birthday, we can gather that it was filmed on December 18th, since his birthday is the 17th. Just fun fact. There's mandatory praise slash partying for the Masters. Zihao leads everything and gets tons of screen time, classic. There's heartfelt messages from the trainees to the mentors, especially from Chaoyi, who gets tons of screen time back to his storyline in episode 1 and 2. There's also reminders of Zhao being on Girls' Planet. This is like one of the only mentions of Girls' Planet on another survival show since Mnet have been intent on burying it. Yeah, like I think the only times that Mnet have really mentioned Girls' Planet was when Gunnock showed up on Boys' Planet. They pointed out that um Dion had debuted from Jellyfish, and when the Wake One trainees showed up, they pointed out that Chaehyun had debuted from Wake One on Girls' Planet. So there's those two. I think that's it for Boys' Planet. And then on Boys 2 Planet, there was nothing. Like when they introduced Jiating, they didn't talk about her debuting through Planet 999, if I remember correctly. If I remember correctly. But they were like, oh, she's part of successful girl group Kepler, she's a great dancer, something, something. And then even on this show, they were just like, yo, it's Xiaoting. And then all of a sudden they were like, yeah, like she said, yeah, I debuted through a survival show, it kind of sucked. Like, that's it. You know, the number of times that Mnet mentioned Boys Planet 1 was through the roof. But Girls Planet, they're done with that. In the interims, Hengyu's team does really well, and both Zihao and Mingche are complimented. Kristen is also complimented, and the song is literally tied to Zihao directly as, quote, his song. Meanwhile, Zi's team struggles more. Jack and Chaoyi are shown to have improved, but Z and Surin especially are told to lighten up, and of course, Zihao is used as the reference. Then we have the master's notes to the trainees, which was where I really appreciated the fact that Zhao Ting was able to write to them in their native language, which is special in my opinion. Of course, people cry. We see Z and Hanwen crying, and we spend a lot of time on Surin crying and being upset about his rank drop, because Mnet wants you to vote for him. Also, Chaoyi and Zihao get to give nice, long, mature reflections on their time on the show, which encourage their fellow trainees, and of course, give the two of them screen time. Next, the name, like the group name, etc. Xiaoting talks about the importance of having a good time on stage, Slay Queen. Anyway, I personally liked all of the potential names for the final group and have no clue what everyone was complaining about, saying they were trash. I mean, it's not like they're the best thing ever, but like, people were like, ugh, are these the options we have to pick from? And I was like, guys, it's fine. I especially liked Modesty and Jupiter Era and couldn't pick between the two. I think I would have gone with Jupiter Era, but like I'm perfectly happy with Modesty, and I think it will grow on people. I feel like it also gives a nice ragtag vibe, and it's like a nice contrast with Aldi 1. Apparently their debut song will also be produced by 3 Racha, which is interesting. Use those connections, Mnet. I personally haven't been a massive fan of most of Free Ruch's work lately, but that doesn't mean that they don't have tons of slayful songs, so I guess we'll see what I think of the actual debut song. I liked Revenant well enough, so hopefully they'll also have more music of that kind. Anyway, I also found it hilarious that One Star mentioned Beta Drive 1 and the fans screamed. Like, this is produce level fourth wall breaking. Next is Zayi's team. We start with Surin working to be a good dance leader but losing confidence, which is quickly sidelined for Zayi and his mini leader arc. There's no losers here, just winners and one note. Zayi, Surin, and Chaoui. Surin was chosen by the Masters as the one who suited the killing part the best and was consistently complimented. He was also shown helping the other members. Zayi was given a sympathetic leader arc with him being desperate and depressed and asking Chaoui for help. Speaking of that, reflects well on Chaoui. Ends with him leading them better and being more confident, and winning the killing part while being main vocal. He's played this show very well to show his vocal skills too. He's really leaning into the hexagonal idol thing. He also gets praised tons and gets lots of screen time. Chaoui is given lots of screen time and is shown being the emotional support for Zayi. This, of course, shows him to be reliable and relied on by other trainees, and shows his good personality to listen and to support others. It also suggests he's a philosopher like Zihao, giving advice to other trainees on soft skills like leadership, and by proxy suggests that his own leadership might be better than expected. This, combined with him being highlighted as having improved, well, let's just say it's a good edit for him. The only note I have is for Dang Hong Hai, who was shown coming up with and pitching the concept for the performance, them being princes. Everyone liked that, so they did it. Good on him. I don't have any particular notes about the performance, except that it makes sense that Zayi won the killing part considering his popularity, and also that everyone was screaming for Zayi and Surin. Duh. It's also interesting that they've brought back post-performance mentor feedback, but like only in the finale? Okay, it's especially meaningless here since the mentors aren't allowed to insult or criticize anyone in the finale, since the audience are expected to believe that all of the trainees are, at this point, worthy of debut and skilled enough to debut. Next is Hengyu's team. The whole thing here is that they need to get the concept down well, and also that Mingche needs to gain confidence. Here are the winners. Zihao, he got tons of screen time, is praised, led the team, shown to be skilled, flashbacks to drama for the 1 billionth time on this show, sob story of him wanting to do well for the fans and failing in drama, and him crying from the teaser. Massive Zihao depression porn. He even mentions how people don't like his face, which is bound to make his fans more protective, and he gets to have a nice moment of seeming strong on the outside but having internal vulnerabilities, which is really appealing to audiences. He's praised by Hengyu as his first choice to have in the group and a good friend, with or without the quote emotional scars. Like, how much further into the Zihao Wump arc can we get? On another note, he also gets praised a lot. Hengyu gets tons of screen time, is shown leading well, making his teammates feel valued, etc. He's praised by others, the usual. Mingche gets lots of screen time and his lack of confidence is highlighted, which makes the audience sympathize for him, especially since he's fighting an uphill battle against Zihao. But he's definitely a smaller winner than Zihao since he didn't really get praised and didn't get to resolve his lacking confidence arc, which honestly makes sense since he wasn't one of Mnet's picks. In the end, Zihao gets the killing part, which is mega unsurprising. He is infinitely more popular than poor Mingche. This stage, probably because of the styling, felt like La 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 cheap Walmart version, but maybe that was part of Mnet's strategy to tie Zihao and Shinlong together more. Right before the performance, everyone screams for Zihao. I'm not sure if I actually preferred this version of the performance more or if I was just biased towards Zihao too much. I'll let you be the judge of that. Ninth, the Christmas party, ballad, sleepover thing, etc. In my opinion, this was pretty unexciting. It has 4 purposes. Fun, variety, content / amusement. These kinds of segments lack proper rigory, especially in the finales, and mostly just do the following point. Screen time for Mnet faces, i.e. the core 4. Getting into your feelings with the fan letters. Note how Chaoui got to read the first one. I actually wasn't sure if these were fan letters or letters to themselves because the subtitles changed several times because of the AI. I think they were letters from their past selves, which would explain Zihao's being insanely well written. Zihao the King returns! The final purpose is filler content. This episode was very strange filler-wise. On one hand, the structure was different from a typical Mnet finale, even if it did include a lot of mandatory segments like the party for the Masters and the sleepover thing where they watched their auditions. It also lacked a signal song performance, leaving it with only 2 songs in the finale, which kind of makes sense considering how short the show has been and how low effort it is. Thank goodness that ballad had some Chinese. Never did I ever think I'd get to see a day where an Mnet finale had Chinese. Shouting, Queen, you deserved better, but look at your children. Not quite thriving, but getting there. On the other hand, bruv, how the fuck did they still manage to make this episode 4 hours for a show with only 18 total trainees and 12 in the finale? No wonder I dread modern Mnet finales. Season 1 was a blissful 2 hours 40 minutes. Dare I say nice and short? The ballad includes mandatory Z-Ren moments and mandatory shots of the fans crying, and my AI subtitles said there was, quote, Chinese-style background music. Gee, thanks, AI. The sleepover segment thing is mostly just a nice way to evoke nostalgia for both the contestants and the audience, while including variety moments and of course providing us with 1. Cute content of contestants being embarrassed at their past selves, and 2. The classic audition content that fans always like to see. Note how the main people highlighted are the main 4, duh. They also almost pull a Produce 101 Season 1 camera payment prank on Jack. It also, of course, includes mandatory letters from trainees to other trainees, which includes, you guessed it, Ziren. And it ties Zihao and Chaoyi together more. It would have been nice if Mnet had showed us this friendship before, especially since they want both to debut, but okay. After this are the mandatory letters from family, which interestingly starts with Dang Hong Hai for some reason. Anyway, before we get into the final lineup, let's discuss from last week. Mnet's ideal lineup. I'll stick with what I said last week, but this time, for the fun of it, I'll order it based on who I think they wanted in each rank. The original lineup with 6 people would be Hengyu, Zihao, Surin, Chaoyi, and Bowen. I think Mnet want either Hengyu or Zihao as rank 1, not that it really matters, since this show hasn't announced that rank 1 will be center at all. And then Ziren, duh. Chaoyi and Bowen could be in either order, but are just people they want to back up their skills and the visuals/stan attraction of the group. This is simple, balanced, and easy to understand. The adjusted lineup, they would want Zihao, Hengyu, Zihao, Surin, Chaoyi, Hanwen, Jack, and Guangxu. Hanwen and Jack are optional but are preferred over Guangxu, RIP, hence their lower ranks. This explains the benefit of showing both Hanwen and Chaoyi in the in-episode interim. Mnet definitely want Zihao more than Suren, and Chaoyi more than Hanwen/Jack. So with that said, how did they do? The final ranks. This episode I managed to fulfill my promise in Boys to Planet of reading during the finale. This finale was so bloated and boring that I didn't even need to catch up on writing this post during the member announcements. I'm reading Tidelands by Philippa Gregory, by the way. Fun fact. Yeah, I finished the book. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was weird. Anyway, I love that they showed tons of Bowen and Binghua since they were the 2, quote, unfairly eliminated trainees last episode who Mnet realistically would have liked to continue. They highlight Bowen's performance skills, basically reinforcing to the audience how dumb we are for letting him be eliminated, and they talk to Binghua and Hanyu, who of course plug Chaoyi and Zihao, who are 2 trainees Mnet really want in the final group. This is where the Hanyu-Zihao connection becomes really important, because Hanyu basically fulfills the role for Zihao that Zihao fulfilled for Shinlong on Boys to Planet, the tearfully eliminated groupmate who desperately wants his friend to debut but is also sad to be left behind. Do you know what this means? Home Race second spin-off where Hanyu is the main character and Shinlong and Zihao come back and cry for their leader's success. Yeah, fat chance, but it's nice to have dreams, I guess. Anyway, it was cute that they were all holding hands when they came out, like all of the trainees. That was cute. Alright, let's talk about the ranks. First is Hengyu. This might be the craziest and most heartwarming fellow trainee reaction to the announcement of a rank 1 since Zhao. I don't think I've ever seen Hengyu smile that much. It's insane. But good on him. Mnet dropped him with the merge, but they liked him enough to save him with this show. His reactions to the delays in the rank 1 announcement were hilarious. Deserved, slay. The only upsetting part of this is that I think Hengyu crying set Zihao off and then Zihao couldn't stop crying. Rip. Yeah, like I think that Zihao probably would have been okay. Or possibly would have been okay if Hengyu hadn't cried first. Second is Zihao. See my comments on Hengyu being dropped in the merge and then restored in this show. These two are the only ones that I'm pretty certain were in the original 8C lineup, which makes me feel even better that they get to debut after they were robbed of a spot in Aldi 1. My AI subs called Zihao Shunyu, like, how did you get that wrong? Third is Zihao, unsurprising, slay. Mentioning Shinlong and Hanyu, slay. His speech, slay. His reaction, slay. His mum, slay. I'm part of the Shinlong squad, but also part of Zihao Nation. The critical thinking king triumphs. He will now grace us with his presence for at least a few more years, and you'd better all be thankful. Slay. Fourth was Guangxu. I found it so funny that Zihao came up to him and said, "I told you so." Everyone knew he would debut, and even Mnet had accepted him at this point. I feel bad for him because I feel like he's about to get mistreated, but let's keep a positive attitude for now, right? If nothing else, he'll gain more publicity for this, which is good news for his future career. Fifth is Surin, slay. He had a nice heartwarming speech, quote, "I want to dance, I want to sing." Now that's the kind of thing I like to see in an idol. Asking him about his mum, who was unable to be there, was such a dick move, but an expected one because it will obviously get a reaction out of him. This is just classic Mnet. Sixth is Yichen. Wahaha, I predicted this last week. Honestly, like, not that it was hard to predict. I thought his speech was nice. I think Mnet stuffed up by showing him in the interim for this episode. It probably helped him keep his rank. Unfortunately, along with Guangxu, I don't think he'll be treated very well, but he's happy that he debuted and that's all that matters. Seventh is Chawi. Gregory, bwahaha, Mnet strikes again. Yo, who in these comments told me he wouldn't be able to get enough fans? I'm watching you. I found it hilarious that Jae-jung said, quote, "Is this the end of the debut members?" And the fans screamed no, and then he gave them some paternalistic frown and headshake. Like, it made me laugh out loud, it was so random. The actual reveal of the final votes reminded me of An audition for some reason. It was a shame that Chawi and Hanwin were the candidates, because I was vaguely rooting for both of them and didn't want either to go, but it is what it is. They were cute together at least. The highlighted 9,000 point difference between the two reinforces that, no, your vote as an international fan seriously does not count. As I'll reiterate later, I think Chawi is resigned to the hate he'll receive, which is a shame. At this point, I actually didn't notice in the finale the whole thing that became like a mini controversy where everyone went to hug Hanwin instead of Chawi, and he was just left by himself. Like, I didn't notice that when it first aired. And all I can say to that is it's unfortunate from both an idol and fan perspective. It's unfortunate that the other trainees on the show did that, and it's unfortunate that the fans are so angry. It's also unfortunate that Hanwin didn't debut. Like, rip him. Mnet would have preferred him to Yuchen, so that kind of sucks. Here are some further thoughts. It's a big shame to see Hanwin go, but I actually think he would have a really good chance of debut if he now went on a smaller survival show, like Woongi and a bunch of the other Boys Planet 1 trainees did. He has a pretty solid core fanbase, so now he just needs to use it somewhere where the competition isn't at least partially rigged against him. It's also sad to see Zihao and Hanwin hugging. Depressing times, squad. Mnet really pulling out the Zihao depression porn this episode. Also sad to see Bowen crying for Hanwin, but on the bright side, this does mean that they have the potential to debut together elsewhere. Slay! It's a shame that we only ended up with 7 members, especially since Mnet would have liked 8 to guarantee both Hanwin and Chawi, since they like both more than Guangxu and Yichen. Hence their desperate bid with allowing so many votes in the final round. But I guess it is what it is. Should have allowed PD picks dumbos. I found it really interesting to see who spoke in which languages. This was just a fun fact. Hilariously, the interim rank 6 candidate reveal did nothing, since it was exactly the same at the end of the episode, suggesting that the gap after Suren was pretty large, which made sense considering him being shown in the original interim. What I mean by this is that, and I'll actually go and check it. Yeah, you can see it here, like, the gap between Suren and Yichen is like nothing compared to the gap between Hengyu and Zei, or Zei and Zihao. But, like, this is a big enough gap. Like, 150,000 points. This should not be votes, it should be points. 150,000 points is, like, not big enough for Yichen or Chawi to surpass. So it made sense that neither of them would overtake Surin. Is it just me, or is it super insulting that the venue was so small that there wasn't even space for the layout with the nice debut chairs? Like, how far will Mnet's Sinophobia go? Yeah, like, where are the chairs? Even Isna had, like, kind of trashy plastic chairs. Anyway, as with the LD1 announcement, this was pretty uneventful / lacking drama and suspense, since just as Mnet intended it, there was basically no change from the status quo at the start of the show. The literal only thing that changed from like the start to the end of the show is Chawi overtook Hanwin. That's basically it. Everything else, like, so unexciting. As I said in the first few episodes, Mnet's core 4 trainees are talented enough that they can easily lead the group, and any other combination of trainees who made it in are basically acceptable, since the group won't be super lacking in any area regardless. Mnet got their core 4, so even though the rest of the group wasn't 100% to plan, they can live with it. I think they're not super stoked about this lineup, certainly not the way they were with Aldi1, but they're okay with it. As my ideal lineup section would suggest, I reckon they'd replace Guangxu and Yichen with Jack and Hanwen if they could. In other notes, the announcement of the number of debut members being kept until the absolute last minute is very predictable for Mnet. See Isna. I personally will follow this group, of course, but I follow basically every Planet group out of curiosity, regardless of whether my pick makes it or not. Either way, I was here for Zihao, so I'm happy. Alright, conclusions. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I think you all should lay off Jaejung. Every produce / planet host ever has been like this. Jaejung isn't any better or worse than anyone else. In fact, I find his seeming nervousness hilarious, and maybe even endearing. Although I am pessimistic for the treatment of this group and was overall disappointed with the lineup of this show, which I thought was a very unexciting lineup, I want to wait and see how they're actually treated at debut and first comeback before making any actual serious, solid predictions. Right now, my prediction of them being treated like knockoff Aldi1 or Kepler is based on the production values of the show, but literally anything could happen. I mean, I didn't expect pretty much any of the Boys Planet 1 spin-off groups to do as well as they did, so I guess there's always hope. Sorry, I'm rambling about pointless things. At the end of the day, I'm very happy for the core 4, and especially, of course, for Zihao, who is the king of this show, and of reality show critical thinking. Slay those haters, king! I predict Zihao will be the leader of the group, and the fan name will be super cute. Let me see if we have a fan name. No, they haven't announced a fandom name either, which is a bit questionable considering like how their treatment could go. Anyway, I'll stick by those 2 predictions. Dear individual Hanwen stans, please don't feel too bad. Your individual votes wouldn't have changed the final results. The gap may have seemed small, but it would have required a large number of group international votes to change the result. Your international votes count for next to nothing, so you not voting for him every single time, if that was you, didn't change the result. If it's anyone's fault, it's Mnet's, but beyond that, it's a group effort, not an individual one. I hope you won't feel too depressed or guilty about this, because I think if Hanwen puts his mind to it, he could have a very fruitful career ahead of him. So with that, another show reaches its end. You can catch me at the next major Mnet show, I'm sure, or if you want to see me before then, you can keep an eye on my YouTube channel, where I'll post some videos on this show and my recap of Produce 101 Season 1. Not in the next few weeks, but in the not too distant future. And until next time, just remember that a critical thought a day keeps Mnet away, and also keeps the crazy K-pop propaganda away. So that's that. I don't have anything else to say about those posts. Are there any good comments here? Or not good, but like interesting. Yeah, people are sad for both Choey and Hanwen. Oh yeah, I thought this was funny. This person was talking about Danganghai being on Boys Planet with Kong, and I was like, oh my goodness, Kong. Like, I I was never like the biggest Kong stan. Like he was never my one pick or anything, but I voted for him on the group and I thought he like, on the show, and I thought he was a really underrated contestant. Like, he was on top of the whatchamacalls it, the vocals in Are You Nice, right? So I was just I was really happy to see that people haven't forgotten about him. The good thing is that I think most of these people were like relatively satisfied with the final lineup. Like the only outside of Hanwen not making it, overall I think people were like pretty happy with the final lineup. I also appreciate that like people are saying thank you for defending Jaejung. I mean, I'll stick by what I said. Like people can say whatever they want about Jaejung, and I know that a lot of people have like a hate burner for him after he made that comment about Hanyu's weight, which I think was scripted anyway. Um, but like it was the fact that people were saying, "Oh, Jaejung's so trash. Like give us someone else as an MC." Like any other MC would have done the exact same thing. Think what you want about Jaejung, whatever, hate him, love him, I don't care. Point is that he is not going to like he's not doing any worse than any other Planet MC. And that's it. That's the end of Home Race. Unlike with Boys to Planet, like I don't have many other things to say after the end of this. I don't think that there were many controversies on this show, probably because it was such a short show with so few people. But like, the worst things I can think of with the final group are things like, some people have divided opinions on Yichen and Guangzhou, but like most people like them and are happy for them. Uh, and there's a bunch of people who think that Chawi was rigged and don't like him and wanted Hanwen over him, but like it's not the end of the world. Um, Ever since he like saved that taxi driver or whatever he did, Hengyu's been like everyone's hero, so he's chilling. I think the biggest issue that I'm seeing right now is the fact that the show has vanished off the face of the planet. I don't mean replays, like I'm sure you can find replays places. What I mean is like even though I know that they have been doing things, I have not heard a peep out of this group. I have not heard a peep out of the group's fandom, and I have not heard or seen anything to do with this show. Like, when Boys Planet both seasons were airing, and even when Girls Planet was airing, Island 2, whatever, every time something happened on the show, there was footage circulating around the internet and fans going, "Ooh, that's great," or "Ooh, that's trash," or "Look at this funny moment," or whatever else. And then that has continued even after the shows have ended. Like, people, both seasons of Boys Planet, and even to a lesser extent Girls Planet, still kind of exist in the public consciousness, but I feel like no one talked about this show. Not while it was running, certainly not after it finished. I don't feel like anyone knows about or cares about the final group. Um, I feel like the final group aren't doing anything. Why haven't they announced a leader and fandom name yet? Like, yeah, it's just a bit. Let's just say it doesn't make me particularly hopeful. This was very experimental. I don't have a lot of hope for the final group or anything like that, but I would love to be pleasantly surprised. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting and or useful. If I am to make another video about this, it will be a big green video like the Produce 101 one, but first I have to get through the other 3 seasons of Produce and then Boys Planet 1 and 2 and Island 2. So let's just say it ain't happening for a little while. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.